I am a dog person.
Okay, I like dogs too.
They taste so much better than cats.
I mean, you say that like it's a joke, mate. You're literally sat next to someone who's eating dog. That's not
Honestly, I'm down to try it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm down to try it. If you want to get dog after this, Loco, I'm down. Okay. You don't have to be ashamed about that, though.
You have to realise the obvious joke to make would be that... Is this actually live now, by the way?
Yeah, it's live.
Oh, wow. What I'll do is I'll make it, but in a way that the audience won't know what I mean. So the obvious joke would be this, veteran.
Yeah.
Shocking to find that someone who worked as staff within H2K would have such callous care for the obvious comment. And I won't say anything more than that. I'll leave it at that. You know, it goes in line with the company, right? It's all about the bottom line, right? This is episode 92 of Listen Loco, because we finished with Someone Insight for the morning. Actually, I don't know. I don't know if we actually did. Did we publicly say that we're going to do another episode of that show?
I have no idea. I can't
remember. Yeah. But anyway, I think we might have. I can't remember if on the last show we did on. So basically, we might do one more Someone Insight, but it'll just be a remote one again, because obviously I'm back in the Netherlands. So I think that might be like, I'm going to guess like Sunday or Monday. It's going to have to be after the finalising. But anyway, we're back on Listen Loco. And as you can see, our guest for this episode, it's one of the rare episodes where someone can actually be on location, because Veteran came out to LA. Right, do you have any official explanations to why you're in LA?
Congrats on 100 Thief job, by the way.
Yeah, cheers. I'm literally here on holiday. I talked about this on stream for a few months now. Basically, I got paid pretty decent money for the Masters gig, and I've always wanted to go to LA because of the film scene and stuff, so now I'm here. It's also kind of overlapping with a bunch of people that I know being here, like you, Phone, so... Yeah, that's pretty much it. Does
it not bother you that like Worlds is in Europe, and in theory you could maybe have gone to Worlds?
I couldn't have gotten the tickets to Worlds at the time, so I decided to just So
even I had tickets and I didn't go.
Even you had tickets.
Yeah.
Okay, see, I could have stolen them from his. I didn't even get invited to like the Riot 10th anniversary thing in London. I was like mind blown about that.
No,
I had nothing. I had nothing to do with Europe in the last few years.
You haven't noticed there is almost a universal trend. Like I made this point a while ago. People missed my point. Is normally, right, the way the industries work in most fields I'm aware of is actually you even invite people who usually are like mildly your enemies just for the sake of like saving face, you know, and to show that, you know, like we're bigger than all that, etc. What's mad is, no joke, even though that was just a party to celebrate Riot's 10th anniversary, this is not a joke. Look at who was invited and who wasn't. They just used it as like a super petty way to like settle all their differences for the last 10 years. Like some of the people who weren't invited were outrageous. People who literally built League of Legends.
Yeah.
Like the biggest pastors, analysts, like people who've been... It's actually crazy, like the diss that they basically sent to the scene. Because here's the other move, right? Not everyone from that list would have gone. But I tell you what, if I heard that they'd actually like sent, like, for example, people like D-Man and Joe, if they'd sent all of those people an actual invite, legit, straight up, I'd actually say like, yeah, fair play to Riot. That's pretty cool, you know? At least you acknowledge, you know, small differences aside or whatever ended, at least you got it. At least you like celebrated what they did for your company, you know.
Yeah.
But sadly, if you know Riot Games, they are a company that really believe that it's the other way around. Like they're so dumb, they think everyone attending that meeting should at the end have turned around and be like, "And thanks to you, Riot, for doing everything and letting us be a part of it." It's like, fuck you, whoever thinks that. Like, remember, you made a video game. Everything else was the rest of us. Like, all you guys do is put CLG versus TSM and hope that that works every year of your entire career. I have to make something interesting out of that. I make people watch a broadcast for longer without anything on the screen, win the game, talking about the game, than you can make people watch the broadcast with the fucking game on the screen that people even want to talk about. That's how next level shit can be in the League of Legends world. But anyway, luckily, since this episode has Veteran on as a guest, now, when the show ends, they can just turn off the webcam, turn to each other and be cunts to each other, instead of having to tell me by proxy what a cunt they'd like to be to each other.
Exactly.
After the show, because that's the part of the show I'm not as big a fan of, believe it or not. Like, by the way, I'll actually tell people a little secret, because this is another little trick I actually learned on shows a long time ago, is, you know, when most people do shows, you know this, Loco, from when we did the Someone Insight show and it was like produced. Normally, they want to know stuff in advance, like what are all the topics you're going to talk about, or like, you know, give us some insight.
Our show used to be like that before you outlawed
in theory
topics. You outlawed remaking topic lists.
And all I'll ask you is this, mate. When was it better? Before the topic list or after the topic list?
We just got better.
Exactly.
Oh my god.
No, we didn't. We didn't. One of us has just done thousands of shows. It's the way you're so dumb. I remember when you had Veteran on that other show and you told me afterwards, like, oh, I actually noticed hosting's hard. It was about like 50 episodes.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Brain, yeah. What's wrong with your brain? Like, it took you that long to figure out that I wasn't just sat there for no reason just saying stuff. Like, sadly, I mean, half the fans of this show still don't even understand that half the time I'm saying shit to pro players. Like, if I don't say something with quite a lot of hyperbole, they're not going to, like, meet me halfway and give me, sort of a wild insight. You know, like, half the people don't even get those techniques. So anyway, I'll just tell everyone a quick piece of info behind the scenes that's actually quite interesting about shows, is I also have a philosophy in line with what I just said, that you don't talk about the topics before you come on the show, because it actually ruins the show, unfortunately. Basically, you get what would be a great conversation. Like, oh, I didn't know you thought that. Why do you think that? What do you think? All that just happens before you come on the show. It actually ruins it. But similarly, I will say one thing that is fucked up about my shows that I'll totally acknowledge. It's just my own idiosyncrasy as a person. Is when I've been on a lot of other shows, they like to make it feel like very social. So, you know, when the show ends, they're still just chatting, a little bit of small talk, 15 minutes. I'm not joking. When some of my shows really do just, when I say like goodbye or whatever, I basically do just press leave call right afterwards. Like, doesn't matter what we talked about for 3 hours. Could be my best friend under the show. It starts, it's leave call at play time. Like, it's over. The show's over. 2 hours is enough. So this is what we're going to do on this episode, right?
Okay.
Since obviously Worlds, you might think has been discussed to death by all the shows and all the rest of it, we're just going to talk about topics around Worlds, including all the matches, but like from angles that we haven't done before. And also, by the way, as far as I know, I don't think aside from that one episode of Leeds United that we did before the groups, I don't think you've done any shows, have you, Veteran?
No, I haven't. I mean, okay, you do all the shows, Tom, and you've been summoning insights, so what can I do?
You're right, actually. I guess it is fair. There was no narrative wake, etc. Yeah, nothing I could have hosted, yeah. No, so what we'll do is, obviously, actually, in Veterans takes on Worlds will be fresh. So let's start here. I'd rather just talk about teams and then go to the final at the end, you know, and like get into the matchup directly towards the end. So talking about some of the teams, right? The first thing I want to know, Veteran, is this. Coming into Worlds, from what I remember, you actually, obviously didn't predict against FPX in the group. It was a terrible group, but you weren't someone who was like high on FPX coming in, right? Because I know you're not like a super LPL fan or anything, right? You thought they were like I'm going to guess like something of a gimmicky team or something?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Doinb would be exploited a lot more than he has been in the tournament. I thought Gimgoon was really bad. And I thought, whereas the best aspects of them were TN and Crisp, I thought that the solo lane discrepancy, I mean, it should have been enough already to have eliminated IG, but they never, like, met up in the LPL, is what I know. But then even when they did meet up against IG, you saw that the discrepancy in jungle support was more than enough, right, to carry them through. So I think I may have underrated that aspect of them. Obviously, I hadn't seen too many games of them, but for me, Doinb is someone I've been arguing against for it feels like 5 years now. At this point, like, I've always called him Doinb. He isn't a strong laner at all. Even in the games versus Fnatic, watching his pro view, he was still not a strong laner whatsoever. And I think most of the praise that he gets is praise that, well, now you do hear about Tian and Crisp all the time, right? Was praise that should be going on to Tian and Crisp. Obviously, what he does with the advantages he's given from that is incredible. They're very much a team that has benefited from how much acceleration matters at this tournament. G2 obviously being the primary benefactors of that, but because that's all that Doinb does, rather than do any sort of kind of individualistic play that's extreme. FPX have been able to do really well in that tournament because of it. But you're right, I wasn't high on them initially. A lot of that is because I think both their solo laners are pretty weak on their own, and this should be a solo lane centric tournament, but ultimately it hasn't gone that way, right?
Actually, that's a good topic to start with, because as I mentioned on that Summoning Insight episode, if you remember, Loco, Veteran is one of the people who not only thinks that like jungle and support have been like basically the two most effective roles if you go back like the last few months, but more importantly, he made a very interesting point when I told you about the MVP discussion, where his logic is, it's like you wouldn't want to have the best support in theory if you have terrible laners, because he'll never be able to actually do the things that a support can do in the game with agency. So the logic is you sort of need to have a certain level of laner, and then you get the jungle and the support activated, and then they can become potentially the best player in the team in the world. So along those lines, then that must make you to some degree have to reassess the FPX team, right? Because the thing is, I would actually agree with you even at this point, mate. Like, I actually think all of their laners are fairly like underwhelming, like as in a raw individual players. Like, obviously, I have massive respect for what that fucking Doinb does as a leader and intangibles. But if you actually look at the game, like, I agree with you. If the jungle and support didn't exist, I don't see a universe where IG could have beat them. Like, I think IG insanely outmatched them lane for lane for lane. But you saw in that series, when you have a way better jungler and a support, holy fuck, what's possible in League of Legends, that you can control the game. So what do you think of FPX now?
Well, I think that something that I underrated and a lot of people underrated was the draft aspect of things, right? Because when we're talking about laners enabling jungler first, right? Like, the jungler can only operate in his initial path based around the path that the laners essentially give him through how they play out their matchups. If you're drafting stuff like Renekton, Rumble, all of this, and the opponents are drafting like Kayle, Syndra, all of this stuff that is perhaps harder to execute in the early phase of the game and is less likely to give you early priority, then the enemy jungle already starts on the back foot. And as we've seen, if TN is in a situation where enemy jungle is starting on the back foot, it's really easy for him to operate within that confine. So it doesn't matter that the Shy is so much better, because the way that the draft has gone in these early scenarios has unlocked jungle support first for FPX, and that's what you ended up seeing a lot here. TN was just able to snowball that off of the early priorities, even if ultimately you could definitely argue that IG won the first draft versus FPX, for example, even when FPX had the Rumble stuff and Rumble just took over the whole goddamn game. Because they always had drafts where TN could unlock and snowball first, it was just very difficult for any team to do anything against them. So I think jungle discrepancy in terms of skill mattered a lot more, because laner discrepancy in terms of matchup ended up mattering a lot more, and that ended up being down to draft phase rather than to individual talent.
Isn't that part of talent, though? Being able to play certain matchups and being able to have a champion pool that allows you to neutralize?
It's just so easy to play out like early phases of something like Renekton versus early phases of something like Kayle in a way that gives your jungler as much room as possible to operate around the map, right? So then the fact that Gimgoon isn't necessarily going to be, in terms of minutia, stronger, it doesn't matter, because wave control is very easy for him to get in the early phases of the game just based on these matchups. So TN is already ahead on what he wants to do around the map, which snowballs into making it harder for the laners to do what they want upon the next resets, right? So that, I think that was something I deprioritized. I didn't realize that Gimgoon and Doinb could be made up for in the draft phase in that regard, and that would just end up mattering more.
Also, Gimgoon just played way better than he normally did.
I think he's had some really bad games in this tournament regardless.
Yeah, but in that matchup versus IG and the Shy...
In that matchup versus IG?
Yeah. It's like he just knew what his job was in that match. Like, I think they must have like coached him very well. He just looked like he knew exactly what his job was in the game.
You can argue that, and I think that he did know what his job was in the game.
I don't think he's that good a player personally. I think he's a bit.
He's not that good a player, but honestly, his job was incredibly easy when you have Rumble rolling up and making enemy top laner 0-6 as fast as he is, right?
But also, like, he did stuff like he's playing Renekton versus Quinn, and he's burning Quinn Flash Cleanse, and like versus the best top laner in the world. There's aspects to the Shy playing badly, but there's also aspects to Gimgoon being able to play the losing matchup and keep it even and not get blown out.
Yes.
There was immense amount more pressure being done on the lane from mid jungle than was done from any position.
Even
Shies, right?
yeah. When Rumble and Kiana started getting involved, yes, 100% for sure. But even before that phase, he didn't get blown out and he stayed even on losing matchups.
I mean, I didn't think Gimgoon was like the worst top player in the tournament. Right?
But he's playing versus the Shy. He's playing versus the Shy.
Yeah, he's playing versus the Shy. The Shy wasn't necessarily playing like super strong matchups the whole time. I do agree on Quinn versus Renekton. Theoretically, that is a Quinn favored matchup, though I do think it's a lot more of a skill based matchup than people have been indicating.
There's a reason everyone isn't picking it in this tournament for start off.
Yes, there's a reason. But at the same time, I still think that this is majority things that are being made up for in the draft phase when it comes to Gimgoon and Doinb. It doesn't matter once it comes to super late phases. What matters is the fact that FPX had so much control of the map that you could almost never model it as a strictly one-on-one matchup, Gimgoon versus the Shy after a point. Though yes, there were obviously instances where the Shy was getting like summoners burned early versus Gimgoon. I still don't think that Gimgoon, we can't say on the basis of this that Gimgoon is better than the Shy, for example, right?
Sure.
That still does not matter also. That wasn't the difference maker. The difference maker was still everything else that was going on the map. And even if those things don't happen early for the Shy, maybe it delays certain aspects of the snowballing, but honestly, FPX still have absolute control of the map once mid-game comes around. And when you have Rumble, that matters so goddamn much.
What do you think then about, since you said like draft mattered so much for FPX, like they've certainly had some comps in this tournament where like sometimes they ran the power pick, sometimes they had just shit that they clearly want to run just for what they thought they could do in the game with it, like they didn't necessarily prioritize all the time. What do you think this is a team that's like very systemic? or systems based, whatever you describe it as?
Oh, vast majority of teams are systems based. Like, I have no idea why this ended up being like a debate all year. Like, so many goddamn teams are literally system based. Like, there are literally playbooks for so many of these teams. I think FPX are fully aware that most of their advantages come from how jungle support operate around Doinb rather than Doinb himself. And I do think that they do come in with a set series of drafts that they want to do and a set series of plays that they want to execute based around those drafts. And I do think ultimately this ends up making your team more decisive, right? Your team is far more decisive. It operates within these kinds of
You know what you want to do,
yeah.
Yeah,
you know what you want to do. While the enemy team, if they don't have this, are just faffing about for ages, reacting to your play, reacting to your state on the map, right? So I think that, obviously FPX are systems-based, and that only works in their favor, but the majority of teams are systems-based in this kind of manner. So it's not like necessarily an insult versus FPX.
Okay,
it's a
but in this
fundamental
case,
of why they work.
So their system, one of the things that's been quite interesting is, don't they basically play League of Legends the way we used to play it, like, I'm going to say like 2 years ago, where you just try to get like mid-priority and then push that to the bot lane?
The inclusion of Crisp in these plays is the difference maker though, right? Like, that's been the big thing that separated top teams from mid-tier teams, has been the usage of supports. Having a strong support has mattered so much more than it has in other years. And when you have, oh god, who was the support player for IG?
Baolan.
Oh god, yes, that Inter.
He doesn't deserve to have a name.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. I had Beryl coming in my head the whole time. It was like, wait, no, Beryl could literally never have played against him. No. But Baolan, that's a monster. And like, when you have Baolan versus Chris, one of them is going to have so much more impact towards midsection than the other could ever do. One of them is going to know so much more what the limits of what they can do around the map in that regard, because they have been playing that way for the whole split, right? And Chris took so many risky kinds of decisions that other support players wouldn't have. I wouldn't even necessarily say risky. I mean risky only in that it had a high percentage death for himself, but even in his death, he was still getting a lot for his teams in those regards. So I would see sometimes comments on people thinking that Chris was inting certain games, where Chris was actually setting up so much for his team it was unreal. You can afford to give up your life in a lot of those regards, and Chris has the experience of that because Chris has played this way for at least a split. I haven't watched FPX for a whole season, so I can't tell you for a fact. But I would be surprised if they weren't doing this for the entire split. And I think that difference making there is something that we don't have 2 years ago. And I think 2 years ago, they don't even have the understanding of resets that we do right now, but that's more of like a G2 thing rather than an FPX thing. But FPX is still pretty strong in that department.
Loco,
what's up?
Thinking back in the history of League, one of the reasons why I know, for example, like Monty back in the day used to think that Chinese teams were like mad overrated, is because, they always had the player talent, like in terms of like raw, like laners and skill and stuff. But actually, I used to agree with him. The two positions they used to be the most whack at, that showed they didn't understand the game, was jungle and support. Like, you could always find a sick AD carry. You could always find some really good mid laner. But actually, to find like a godlike jungler, and especially a godlike support, like they had a different vision of what both those roles were back in the day in China. So what do you think about the fact that the last couple of years, it feels like they've made massive strides in that regard?
Regarding jungle and support?
Like, would you agree? Would you characterize it similarly? What do you think? From back in the day in your time, coming to now?
I mean, I definitely think that's true. Like, their jungle support role leveled up so much more, but isn't that due to just playing against Korean teams and playing against other teams that are better than them and just learning, like, hey, like, look at what these guys are doing with their jungle, with their support, and people have just been getting so good at copying each other. Like, I think it really showed with Fnatic. Fnatic is amazing at copying from G2, and generally, like, all the other teams around the world, like, information is so readily available now. Like, people have analysts, like, people have coaches that watch LCK, LPL, LEC religiously, and they're able to copy whatever is good. So I think it's more so than Chinese supports and junglers like leveled up on their own. They just normalize with like the kind of macro that they see everywhere.
I think
interesting you would say that, because speaking of people who are really brilliant at copying and who make use of knowledge from other regions, a little bird, I told you I've got my spies, Loco, they're always listening, son. My little spies told me that on a different show than mine, you predicted that G2 would win the final for your sub goal, and then when you went to the studio, you talked to Papa Smithy privately, and he convinced you, didn't he? He convinced you that you knew nothing about the game, and you just said, yes, Papa, I will delete all of my own thoughts about the game for the last fucking 8 years of playing it shit, and I'll just copy. I'll just do a literal fucking... Why don't I melt the hard drive of your brain into my brain, and I'll just say whatever you tell me in these 5 minutes before I go live. Mate, here's the thing, right? Even though I agree with the premise that, someone could make a good point that could tip you on with it, that does sound whack when I say it like that, doesn't it? Come on, man. What the fuck?
Okay, What is it?
Come on.
I still. How to explain this?
Yeah, exactly. How to explain yourself when you're being caught exactly with your hand in the fucking cookie jar, and then your mother's got that fucking switch. Yeah, exactly. You better start explaining yourself, boy. There's no explanation, is there? You just said it for the fucking clicks.
Yeah,
and then when you got there, Papa just made a good point. You were like, yes, I made this. And you just took his opinion, didn't you? Yeah, you did.
If you want, what I really think, I think it's going to be a close final. And if I had to pick a team, like gun to my head and no sub goal, I would have to lean G2. I think G2 overall as a team is so good about taking apart teams and playing different styles. And IG was so rigid when they faced off versus FPX, like playing Syndra into Rumble. Like if they pick Rumble, Caps is going to have a different pick. And also the whole Nautilus being able to be flex both lane is a huge problem for IG in terms of drafting versus FPX. And I think if G2 encounters the same problem with Nautilus, they're just going to ban it. Like G2 is just going to be way smarter about the approach. And it was really hard for me to think about things that FPX does better than G2. And the one thing that I did think about was their jungler is better than Jankos from what Tien has shown. Okay. I feel like
was that the point that Papa made that kind of won you over?
Well, you called me correctly. Like I did it for the sub goal because like all the G2 fans are like, you're so wrong about G2. Please pick FPX if you get you to 1,000 subs. But I do think G2 is overall like the better team, and it was really hard for me on face check to think of reasons why G2 would be worse than FPX. And like the only thing I really could think of was Jankos is worse than Tien. And jungler matters a lot. Like you can make an argument for Crisp and Mickey X. I think Crisp is maybe a slightly better support, but it's not like
this tournament he's probably outperformed the Unos overall. Yeah.
Mickey X has been up and down, but it's hard to say if like Crisp is like head and shoulder above Mickey X, where you can make the argument at least like with Tien and Jankos. Like Tien is significantly better than Jankos from what we've seen.
I don't think you want to leave LWX alone versus Perks as much as Chris has left him alone versus any other AD in this tournament, though. And that is actually a pretty big issue. Like, they're not getting punished as much versus IG for the sacrifices they make.
Don't worry, Veteran. I might just need to give you this piece of... I'll give you a piece of trivia that you might enjoy, Veteran.
Go on.
Right, simultaneous to all of these opinions, Loco also believes Perks is the best player in the tournament.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
Wait, you don't? You don't?
No, it's just I'm surprised you have that opinion, then think FPX.
Yes, he's unsurprisingly, Loco. He finds it rather bizarre that you would think the best player in the tournament is on the team that you're expecting to lose, and you yourself would probably even agree that to use Freak's phrase, the delta between LWX and Perks is surely bigger than the delta between Tian and fucking Jankos. You know,
but
not they play different roles, to be fair. Of course.
Well, like jungle, when you're better, you can make it feel like you can feel the difference very early in the game, and there's a very real impact. Even if Perks is the best player in the tournament, which I believe he is, and LWX is significantly worse than him, Perks isn't going to be solo killing him in these matchups. Like that's just not something that should be happening at a World Finals level game where the two ADs are left alone and one AD is solo killing the other AD.
So my thing with FPX in general is that I think... So I was obviously one of the guys that fell into the trap of predicting Fnatic over FPX in quarters, right?
We all did in this...
We pretty much all... I'm pretty sure everyone did that. But I think the big thing that I was underestimating was, again, this jungle support difference. Like, obviously, you're right. I have talked up jungle support being, like, such a huge factor, right? But the thing is that FPX have an almost apex level of this across Tien and Crisp, and when it comes to Fnatic, despite what you were saying all year, they just don't have that in jungle, like, at all, right? They have Boxer instead, which, now that the rest of the world is being exposed to Boxer, everyone's pretty much agreed that he's not a strong jungler, right?
My thing was, for the first 4 weeks, Broxah was the best player in LEC, and I still stand by that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was summer, I assume.
Yeah, right? First 4 weeks, Broxah was the best player, and that was a comment I made, and I still stand by that.
Okay.
No, but here's the thing, though. That is like a relevant point to bring up. Because think about this, right, Veteran. The whole year, we have... well, to be fair, I think it was probably like a split. But, you know, we've taken all these idiots telling us that we just obviously... What they do is, you can tell they don't have an argument. Because rather than say, this is what Veteran said about Boxer, and this is why I disagree, half of them come with the angle of, like, wow, what, did Boxer, like, face fuck Veteran? Like, as soon as they come from that angle, you know they're not a serious person, right? That's not... Like, there's no intelligent person. Like, Bertrand Russell didn't just used to have an argument with C.S. Lewis and go, what, did fucking Jesus face fuck your family, C.S. Lewis? No, unsurprisingly, he used to come with like knowledge and intellect, like actual fucking like rhetoric. Very interesting. So no, what I'm going to say is this, right? By the logic of how much everyone in Europe and the world has hyped Broxer, why is he not being called like Dardy Award winner, for example? Why is he not being called someone where everyone's like, where was Broxer in that series? Where has he been in the tournament? Oh my God, what happened to him? Nobody said a fucking word about Broxer.
Because he's a nice guy.
That's actually true.
He's a nice guy.
Exactly, but the difference is it would be fine to not say anything now because, by the way, I don't think the teams that he lost to was shameful. He lost to teams that were better than them, but in the context of how people hyped him, he should actually be considered one of the missing players of the world. Like, where was this guy on the biggest stage, you know? I actually myself was surprised how bad he was. Like, here's the thing, I've never thought he was a bad player, I just think he's an average player.
So I think that this discrepancy doesn't exist with G2. Now, what always goes wrong with predictions, right, is that you predict a version of your team to show up. The version of G2 I want to show up is the version that had Mickey X playing the series he played against SK Telecom, right? If he plays that series against FPX and Jankos is game 4 Jankos every single game versus FPX, there's literally no chance for FPX whatsoever. Which means the version of G2 that we want does exist in some way, shape, or form. It's not necessarily an uncommon version of G2 either. Mickey X didn't have like a super strong group stage performance, but he has generally been one of the strongest aspects of G2 in Europe particularly. He was strongest for a very consistent period, and now he appears to be in his zone again on the international stage. I think that the way that Jankos and Mickey X works together is, despite the way G2 play, despite the way G2 have been said to play, actually less sacrificial than the way FPX does. I think LWX will find many situations it's not necessarily just 1v1, but could potentially even be 1 versus 2, or 1v1 on bad waves, while Chris makes the sacrificial plays that have worked out so well for them. And at the same time, I think that Jankos has just generally been one of the best parts of G2 when they've been on upswings, and they are on one hell of an upswing right now. So I think that they'll be able to match Tian and Crisp. And then if they're able to match Tian and Crisp, the fact that I think Wonder is better than Gimgoon, and the fact that I think that Caps is better than Doinb, is going to matter a lot, and the fact that Loco thinks Perks is the best player in the entire tournament is going to matter so much, as long as you can match Tian and Crisp. I'm not even asking them to just completely shit all over their faces. I'm asking them just to be capable of matching them, and I think if that version of Mickey X shows up here, and an acceptable version of Jankos shows up, I think there's no question that they will be able to. So...
What about on the... Oh, by the way, I actually agree with you on that principle. That's actually why, for the final... Like, when we were going to the semis, I really did think whoever won G2 or SKT would not only win, but I even thought it would be like an easy final, you know? I thought like if they play IG, there's not a fucking real team, and FPX actually just hadn't looked at their peak form yet. But I have to say, after watching the semi-finals, I can't say G2 like definitely wins. There's no chance to say like there's certainly a chance FPX wins. And actually, I even think this storyline's a very good one if you want to make it feel competitive. Which is, if you looked at the G2 players, you'd argue probably the jungler and the support have probably been the two that have underperformed the most. Meanwhile, on the other team, jungler and support look like the best players. Yes. Like that's a pretty decent narrative to set up for a chance for FPX to win the series.
Yeah. So long as G2 continue the upswing that they have, and that's the Mickey X and Jankos that we saw in Game 4 there, that's the Mickey X and Jankos that we get in the finals, they win, for sure. But they have to play at that level, which it's good. They have to play some of the best League of Legends they've played to win the whole thing, right? That's how it should be.
You should have to, exactly, I agree.
Yeah. So, whereas I think, conversely, I think Caps, Wonder, and Perks are pretty much guaranteed to be better than their counterparts in their roles. But again, we're saying that doesn't necessarily matter as much, and hasn't been shown to matter as much this tournament. If that version of Mickey X kept playing in the quarters, then they don't get out of quarters, right? If they kept playing in the semis, they definitely don't get out of semis. So it's good that they're on an upswing, because if they weren't, they don't win this tournament.
Isn't there an argument to be made? Gimgoon had a better semis than Wonder did. Wonder semis was actually pretty disappointing.
Was it?
Yeah.
Really? I don't really think that his semis.
I thought his own game was good. I don't know about the others, but I thought he was just.
He was never really on like such a hard acceleration lane as it was. I mean, he played 2 on games, no? He played 2 on games.
2 on games, a Camille game.
Dude, if you were saying earlier about how people overemphasize that like Perks in the bot lane is a sacrificial one on G2.
Yeah,
dude,
they won like that series.
I feel like by default it's Wonder that they just fucking just abandon it. And you take care of yourself, mate.
So in the SKT series, he obviously was like the sacrificial lamb, quote unquote. His on games were obviously good, but he was on pretty good early matchups for them. He was like on versus Vladimir in the last game, right? I can't remember what his first game.
I think so, yes.
Even though it was like a map split scenario there. Vladimir doesn't really have very strong options early versus Ornn. It's actually really difficult at that stage. But versus Damwon, for example, like where they basically played through top jungle, right? Like he shafted Naguri the whole fucking sim.
No, I don't argue with you on quarters, but in semis, even in the Ornn game, the one game where it was a game where Perks was on Ezreal. He's overstaying for waves. He's not coming to things on time. In the Camille game, he's getting solo killed. I actually thought he was pretty problematic.
This is the Camille game early. I remember that now. Yeah, no. You've reminded me of like the early Camille game, and there, yeah, no, I'll grant you that. Like the first 2 deaths were unforgivable somewhat. But on the Ornn thing, so this is actually a general, very broad topic when it comes to G2. I noticed that they basically never make proper side trades, right? What they do is that they basically play both side lanes at once. So if you saw this a lot in the Damwon series, and I think actually Ambition made a video where he talked a bit about it as well, where he talks about this as being like a surprising thing. It's not greed. It's actually it's pretty strong actually. Mm-hmm. So when they look to make a hardcore play for topside on a crashing wave, right, you'll see the 2v2 bots suddenly go in.
Yeah,
right?
They greed.
You say they greed, but what you absolutely guarantee there is 2 things.
You haven't thought this through, yeah. Keep going.
What you haven't thought about is that when they do this, you are essentially set a wave behind on bot side. Yes, you get the kills, but the alternative is that as G2, you simply back off. You don't necessarily give them the kills, but you do give them time on that side of the map that they would have parity on with your time on top side of the map. You never have that option against G2. This has been said of G2 a lot now in this tournament, is that their management of time is incredible. Yeah. And because they make so many split plays like this is a huge reason why that time is incredible in that regard. And Ornn is actually a very good champion to do this sort of thing on. I can't remember these specific points that you're talking about right now. But at a fundamental level, this kind of like over-aggression on both sides, ignoring the diagonal rule, so to speak, which is still a part of all the Koreans' playbooks, has actually been a reason why it's seemingly been so difficult to close out versus G2 on any lead you have, and why G2 always seem to be ahead on the next play, even if the last play wasn't just a straight trade in their favour. And in that 2v2, for example, that Ambition went over, they got 1 kill, but even if they don't get that kill, they're still ahead on the next reset on the map and on the next play.
Alright, so to put it really simply, G2 will play both sides whenever they're making a play instead of playing strong and weak side, and then it helps them stay up in timer and prevents the enemy team from playing farther on the weak side, right?
Put it this way, think about the SKT series. Like, one of the parts that people missed was, yes, SKT was taking Barons, but not in scenarios, actually, that necessarily you win the game off anyway. Like, G2 did an amazing job of just keeping, like, the wave state so you don't end the game if you lose the fight. Like, actually, that's the part that I feel like... That's why, actually, Loco, you saying that there, I'm not even dissing you here. That's the problem, is I've no doubt Ambition has no clue what the fuck is going on. I don't know if you've been paying attention to Worlds, but this Season 9 Worlds, clip this if you want, has shown that Korea is absolutely fraudulent at their knowledge of League of Legends in 2019. Keyword, in 2019. Because in 2019, they have continually, to this point in time even, bashed their head against the wall of their old understanding of the game and never understood there's a wall there. They keep thinking the rest of the world is the one wrong. Like, dude, to this day, these stupid Koreans think it's G2 playing the fucking game wrong after beating all of their gods in Best of 5 series and about to complete the fucking career slam. Like, what are you guys talking about? Every single analyst except one guy in Korean broadcast picking down one gaming to beat them in a Best of 5.
He's the EU specialist. He's the EU specialist.
Yeah.
First of all, that's wrong, because apparently on the quarterfinals he even himself predicted down one. That was a different guy. He wasn't always the same name.
Top side. He predicted G2 both times. He's the guy that was correct both times.
And then in the SKT series, again, they all predicted SKT. Again, a number of them 3-0 as well, but they weren't even giving G2 a chance. In fact, you know what's brilliant? I can't confirm this, I don't know Korean, so maybe you know this, Loco.
Yeah.
In Korea, I'm going to go ahead and guess, they really all fell into the fan trap and thought SKT had huge leads and somehow G2 was like lucky to come back. Is it true? Do they think something like that?
I only listen to the English broadcast, so it's hard for me to say. Yeah. But
I would guess, though, because like if you look at it, right, to this day, like that Ambition video I thought was really embarrassing, dude. Because between him and Cloud Templar, it's like, you motherfuckers aren't even in 2019. This may as well be like that movie, like Frequency, where a guy was communicating with his dead father through a fucking radio like 30 years in the future. Like, that's what this feels like. It feels like, wait a minute, I want to see like the clock in the background. Wait a minute. Ambition's in 2013. Holy fuck, like, give me a break. Like, how are these guys so... This is the key thing, though, because I was talking with Veteran about this the other day, actually. I feel like the real problem is this. everyone else has nailed a basic, right? Which is, yes, Korean League of Legends typically is based around the concept of like min-maxing the game, like minimum possible risk for the max possible reward, and then any little edge you get. That's why they do that. Still do that thing where you spread it across the whole map. The logic is like, instead of having one little edge which could then be countered, spread the edge and gradually, like grind someone down basically. Whereas like League of Legends, it's funny. I'll give you a great analogy you might appreciate, Loco, because you're an old school fan of StarCraft. So in StarCraft Brood War, one of the things people like me love about StarCraft Brood War is when you play a game, unless someone literally does a very quick cheese, the game's usually going to have a pretty lengthy like game length time. And the good thing about Brood War is it's very segmented. Like if me and you have a battle at this top base and I lose, I don't just lose the game. I then, maybe even as I'm losing that fight, I like increase population and production on a different base to make up for it, or I take a different base. It's like it's like a chess match, isn't it? It doesn't just end instantly. But if you ever followed StarCraft 2, one of the things people hated about StarCraft 2 is you very quickly get your army to the max, you just throw them into each other, and sometimes one or two fights just ends the whole game. That's what League was like this year. When this year all you had to do was like kill the Baron at the right time after one key fight. That's a terrible meta for Korean League of Legends. That there's not a lot of like decision making there. There's not a lot of small edges you can accrue. That's the kind of game that Chinese League of Legends should love. It's like one big flashpoint that if you win that massive fight, you win the game. So I feel like the problem is Koreans just haven't even got like the paradigm of where League is at the moment. Because as I said, they still think G2 are like being like risky. Dude, I agree with what Kelsey said on the Elitist United before MSI. G2 clearly, it's insane, have had the best read on the meta in League of Legends all of this year pretty much.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't know, like maybe you can credit when Fnatic had like the early game stuff, sort of. Like it's about the only innovation I can think anyone else did in the whole fucking scene that wasn't G2 just being the best at the fundamental aspects of the game. So I actually think Korea's way off on that one.
I want to agree with everything you said regarding G2 and also agree with stuff you said regarding Korea being far behind. That's also an opinion I share. But one thing I will say about G2 playstyle and why it's so dominant is it's very new and it's also something very exclusive to G2. I'm sure meta's going to change a lot in 2020 with like the whole elemental rifts and like the map changing and different champions being added. But if there wasn't a huge map change and G2 maintained the same, their playstyle would be a lot less effective. Just even like the two-way push thing that we talked about, right? If people are ready for it and people see the same pattern over and over and again, and when they can kind of expect the over-aggression, they'll deal with it so much better. The time that G2 is giving up Dragon and diving Khan, if we see that pattern over and over again, like we can see them devalue Dragon and do cross-map plays, people will be way more ready for the dive and people will invest way less people into the Dragon and kind of expect G2 and also metagame on top of what they're doing. But G2 has figured out League of Legends, at least for this patch and this year, in a way that other teams haven't, and they're just trying to play catch-up. Like, so it seems unstoppable, but if we just maintain like no changes and no patch, and play the same patch over and over again, it will get a lot less figured out and that gap will close. But right now, in this current meta, the macro gap is huge, and I definitely do agree with you.
Because actually, that's one thing I want to get Veteran's take on, since we haven't heard him on any shows during Worlds. Like, what was your thoughts on the way that whole scenario played out, where like SKT basically got every Baron but one, and yet G2 won most of the games? Like, what did you think on that? Because I know that was like a big divide where people didn't know, like, here's the thing. When I say, like, G2 are geniuses, blah, 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 I mean in the moment they're geniuses. Like, in the second that they make the choice, like they did the great trade. I don't really think they came into those games like, we're going to trick them all by giving up all the Barons. Like, there's no way they did that. Like, that part's, people have over-egged the story. So what do you think on that whole aspect? Like, the idea that, like, they obviously had a different read to SKT very fundamentally.
So I haven't looked at the, like, because obviously they're like Vedius did a video and did a video, Alyssa did a video, all this stuff. Like, I haven't looked at their specific arguments with regards to that. Okay. But this particular Baron thing, where they're giving up these neutral objectives and still winning out the game, we actually saw this in the spring in Europe, Duncan, with the Origin games. Remember the first game of both the Origin sets, G2 were very far behind and they opted to give up neutrals. But what they did when they gave up all of these neutrals was that they played out the waves and the map state to the point where once you have completed the neutral and gotten back on the map, you are significantly far behind in two different steps. First, you're a full reset behind him. You'll always be delayed in that regard. And second, all of the map control is not actually available to you anymore. So what do you want to do once you have Baron. You want to be able to shove out all of the waves and then transfer priority to a point where you're going to be able to make an acceleration play around while they have to answer all the waves, right? But first, all of the waves are in such a horrible position for you in the first place that you actually have to set up to get the waves out into a position where you're crashing in the first place without danger. That's already difficult because G2 spent the time you spent doing the Baron, shoving everything out, getting de facto control, and now you're playing with so much fog of war in mind, you have to get all this control back. So now you're automatically waves behind doing that. At the same time, G2 are ahead on the play to the point where if you make any misstep in this, it's very easy for them to capitalize on it and then put you even further behind on that Baron play. They're almost continuously going to be able to do this, and they did this against Origin to a very strong extent because Origin over-prioritized Drake. That was always our criticism of Origin, right? They over-prioritized Drake. So every time Origin did a Drake, they lost the whole fucking map for it. And that was what you were getting with this Baron. A lot is being said about what happened post-Baron, when SKT wasn't able to transition properly from a 1-3-1 into like a 4-1, but G2 will intrinsically make this harder for you anyway, and we've seen them do that versus European teams a lot. So I think that's why we ended up with a scenario where they lost almost every Baron, but they won the series anyway. They've had plenty of times where they have been behind, they've decided we can't contest these, and then just get given it up in favour of a good map state. I think the response would be, if it was the other way around, and G2 had SKT's comp, I don't think G2 would have taken the Baron at those points. I think G2 opt to keep Baron up as like a bait point to split the opponents, but the moment that you take Baron, you kind of remove that. And they would rather keep Baron open to make these better map plays to force you to split, to accelerate in that regard, rather than just take Baron and then try to accelerate with their composition. So that's
Does that only apply to this specific series though? Like, for example, would you expect this potentially happen in the FPX series if FPX gets leads?
So no, I would expect it to happen versus FPX, yeah. And I think that's a big thing, is that FPX are also a team that seems to understand neutrals as something to bait a team fight around, right? Yes. Whereas G2 see it as a diversion. Like, G2 will opt into like 3 people on Baron with 2 people on side lane, like the Fnatic 032, but with Baron up. Once they have all of that control, if they have controlled Baron in that regard, they don't just wink in Baron vision and wait for you to jump in on them and then engage on you, right? They will have 3 people starting Baron, 2 people going on side lane, and then you will be forced to make a decision at this point, right? You're going to lose something no matter what. They'd rather keep that dynamic up rather than just take Baron as 5 or use the Baron to bait a 5-man team fight, right? That's what they would do. Unless they have like 2 mountains, they can just delete the Baron and get a reset off and not get punished for it, right? So
I missed majority of the conversation, but the stuff you guys were mentioning earlier, G2 really heavily prioritizes map state over taking objectives, where other teams have really huge priority on objectives. And where it shows in the stats is G2 have less dragons when they're ahead compared to other teams with a similar kind of lead. And G2 generally at 15 have much higher gold than other teams that are strong in the meta. Yeah. So that's where it shows in the stat. But I would
also say as well, by the way, like one area in League that, considering how many like Baron players, like obviously almost every game this year involved Baron players at some point in time. I will say, even though like Mark Z was totally right, idiot fans who were like, what does the Baron even give you? Just push him out. It's like, that's totally wrong. But at the same time, I will say an area that is actually a flawed concept in my opinion in League of Legends at the moment. So I'm bold statement here, since I'm clearly not an expert. I'll give you this, right? So one of the problems that we had in, let me think how to explain this. Wait there a second. I had an analogy from CSGO, but I'm trying to think what it was. Let me think a sec. So this is about Baron power play. Fuck, what was the concept? I don't know, actually. Let me think. This is a good one, though, so I'm trying to remember it. Let me think.
SKT has shit Baron play, if that's what you were talking about.
I'm trying to think. I've lost what the first point was.
I can go in on this because actually you brought up a point earlier, and I think it's applicable here. You brought up the point that potentially we've learned a lot from like Korean teams and stuff like this, right? Whereas actually everything that you're pointing to alludes to where we actually learned all this from, which was 2017 Flash Wolves. Do you remember that IEM tournament that Flash Wolves won, where
people can hear it on cam? So just speak without it.
It's not solved. Okay, but basically 2017.
I'll give it to you
2017 Flash Wolves. 2017 Flash Wolves, the one that won that IAM tournament where G2 got stomped. that was where G2 learned for the first time. I remember Miffy talking about this at the time. G2 learned for the first time that what Flash Wolves are playing for in the early game, and what made Flash Wolves' early game actually so strong. They weren't playing for gold. They weren't playing for vision. They weren't even playing for like champ priorities, for swap priority, anything like that. They were playing for resets. For resets. That's the specific thing they were playing for.
Resets give you good map state.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's the secondary thing. Obviously, like that gives you better map state. But the only thing they cared for there wasn't the gold, wasn't the towers, wasn't the vision. The thing that they prioritized above all this was resets. That was what they learned in 2017. 2018 and 2019 advancements have been built upon this thing that was added to EU's repertoire back then, right? So
I'm always for shit talking someone, but one thing I generally try not to do is shit talking someone when they aren't here. But that is where I disagree with Ellis's like freezing theory so much. Like freezing fucks.
Not sure that's even true, by the way. You definitely talk shit. Go on. But tell us what you think about LS. Go on.
Well, no, not LS, but just the theory of freezing. That's where I disagree so heavily with freezing. Freezing fucks up your map state, and the game has evolved so much regarding like faster and faster map state and being in better positions to do things. So like map state isn't something that's like visible, right? You can have the same amount of gold and have a shittier map state. Like, and why it matters so much is like nowadays like people aren't opting into what I would like to call like a gentleman's fight, where you have your Maokais and Science up front, and then you have your Jinxes and the Kog'Maws in the back. It's very like it's very random. And
dude, most fights don't even start as 5v5s anymore. They just start as like a 1v1, 2v2, and then they just become a 5v5.
Yeah, whoever gets like the first hidden almost always wins, and whoever gets like the first bite is so relevant in the fight. So where someone has brush control and you have to check into them, it's so dangerous in the meta right now. And on top of that, that's why I love champions like Gragas and Rakan. Like in a meta with so much squishies and where you have map state and you have to check into a Gragas or a Rakan, you get engaged on so quickly and so easily. So yeah, map states matter so much.
Oh, I remembered my point from earlier, right? Because the thing is, like, whenever you try to make like an abstract point, you got to know the details. No point half-assing it. So it goes like this, right? One of the things that we actually found in Counter-Strike, after years of playing the game, by the way, because the problem with like fundamental principles is when you say fundamental, unfortunately, a pleb thinks, oh, he means like very basic, and so it's very simple to understand. Like, no, what we mean is like it underlies everything. So sometimes that can still be a quite an advanced concept, even though it is fundamental to the game. Like it's a basis of that you have to understand. And the point is, until you understand that concept, some of the rest of the game doesn't unlock. So one of the things in Counter-Strike that took a long time to figure out, and still is debated to this day, because they tweak in Counter-Strike the money system, like how much money you get per round or for the bomb exploding or something. The problem is it took people years to figure out when you should do a save if you're not going to win the round, basically. Because in the past, what you did is, if you're the CTs and they plant the bomb, you try and kill them and defuse the bomb. If you're the terrorists and you try and get the bomb down, you almost never used to just save because you had a couple of guys alive, but you didn't think you had the highest chance to win the round. But one of the reasons why you save is so that next round you have the gun, or next round you don't give up more of your money to buy another gun. So similarly, this is where I feel like, I want to get your take on this as veteran. I feel like a massive discrepancy in League at the moment is I've seen so many teams take fights, right, where they have the lead on the map, they have pressure, they have like a winning lane, they have agency on the map, but they opt into a Baron fight thinking it's going to win them the game. But what they don't think about is this, veteran. Yes, if they sweep, they win the game. But if you do like a fight where one guy survives from your team against a Baron buff, that doesn't even fucking help. Like that actually might, based on the other team and what reset they get, that might actually help them. You might actually have just turned the whole game in their favor. Like, people think basically this is the premise. It's no longer the case that it's always best to take the Baron. It's no longer even if you can win that fight. It's not always right.
So the thing about Baron is, when the team is ahead, you want Baron to be up because it's a tool you can use to force the enemy team to come into you. If as a team where you are ahead and then you go kind of evenish on a Baron fight where one or two people survive and Baron is no longer on the map, you can't snowball the map forward without the Baron being on. So like how you use Baron when you're stronger, even if you don't take it, it's extremely, extremely important in terms of the game accelerating. And that's where I think Korea is so fucking weak.
No, because like I say, that's part of their overemphasizing it. Like they're acting as though if they take these Baron fights and we do it perfectly and we get the Baron and we get all 5 people, yeah, you do end the game. But like I say, if you get one, it's actually like the risk is way too high. Don't you think so?
I mean, I think
I lagged out a second. We're there.
No,
you didn't lag out. You're here. But what I think about this is that you know where 5 people are that whole time. Like, if you actually just use Baron as okay, he's gone. Okay, I guess he couldn't hear us. If you do use Baron as like a 5-man bait tool, you know where 5 people are the whole time. You know that once they have Baron, they're going to be closing in on you. So you know that if you trade that for economy right now, you'll be better situated for the next fight, and the next fight is probably coming if they do Baron as 5 at that point, right? And you put yourself ahead on the map with theoretically more economy.
Wait there one sec.
Sure.
Yeah, there we go, right? For some reason, even though I was on the internet, I wasn't disconnected me, so I just had to change the region back again. Sometimes it's a bug like that. Anyway, what were you saying?
It becomes a better play in like a lot of compositions as a result, because sometimes that economy is enough to push you through into being able to win the next fight, which you know will happen because they're taking Baron and suddenly they have no choice but to have their waves shoved into you, and you are ahead on the map on them because you didn't send 5 people to Baron at that point, right? So very often it can just be better to do that, and it's not, you don't ever have to take the risk of doing the Baron fight, which is something I don't think that a lot of Korean teams accept right now, which is why
because the key thing is like Veteran. Basically, the reason I want to ask you about that topic is I realise first of all, one thing that is unfair about this entire discussion is I don't entirely blame Koreans. By the way, I blame them for being as bad as they are at reading the game, because these are the motherfuckers I've been told are the gods of the games. They're all geniuses and understand things 1,000 times more than me because I have white skin. Apparently, that makes me incapable of looking at a screen and seeing what the fucking pixels are doing. Apparently, that's like a mad thing in League of Legends. So, but when I find out like the frauds in this sense, like one of the things I feel like is, aside from like the understanding of the game, I don't think they could execute what G2 does anyway. But one thing that is a flaw is this: I feel like if the game stays similar to how it is now, Veteran, a team like G2, logically, now there's a scenario where in certain matchups, you're going to have like a reverse Baron bait, where you want to trick the enemy to go and get it and you don't go. So the bait then is, do you leave your lanes to join him? That could actually be a real thing. As opposed to the opposite, what Loco described, the classic Baron bait, where you just, if you have the lead, you force them choose, right, do I take the Baron or do you fight me? It's a way to get a fight. This is actually a way to fuck with the other team. It's very going to be hard to operate. Obviously, you're going to have to know exactly what they're doing. But you think that's a real thing?
I personally don't think that's ever going to be a real thing, because if you have control over Baron and you set up properly, the map is designed where the river is wide and the chokes coming into Baron are narrow. So essentially, like, you have to be forced into choke points to even get to that point, and you're checking in blind. So just the map state of the team that's controlling Baron is almost always ahead.
Hey man, river control doesn't matter. I've had to hear that a lot in the last few weeks.
I don't want to get into river control, but I'm saying...
man.
Right, I'll just ask, you know what, I'll do one of those things, Loco, where what happens is when I get like frustrated, instead of just like literally telling you how everyone in your entire family tree like was a peasant serf who deserved to not make it through the barrier and make it into the egg, I'll just do this. I'll do one of those ones where I just ask the fans, right? Fans, I just literally gave like a 2-minute question there where I explained the concept of a reverse Baron power play, where what would happen is, a reverse Baron bait rather, where what would happen is the laners would bait the other team by not leaving lane, and therefore the team doing the Baron in a scenario like this would have to ask themselves, should we continue doing the Baron if they stay in the lanes? Because as we just described before, G2 actually got favourable maps there. Now, after I said all that, Loco then just explained to me why doing a normal Baron bait works when the team walk through the brushes blind with no I'll just leave that to the audience. I'll leave that to the audience to decide whether the two of us were talking to each other or one of them didn't listen and then thought, I heard him say something about Baron bait, and then just said something like at this point, Norco's next line will probably be to tell me what direction Kakariko village is.
I don't know where that village is, but anyways, like, why the reverse Baron bait and regarding like G2 staying in lanes can't work is if that status extends, right, where G2 stays in lane and the team just stays on Baron, then the situation just gets worse and worse for G2. So I don't think a reverse Baron bait is a thing.
I mean, the Baron
that was the
stats
point I was asking.
Hard.
I don't think it's going to be a thing.
No, that's what I was just asking basically, whether the premise, like as an abstract, could ever happen.
I don't think
By
so.
the way,
it would imply it would imply Baron stats themselves are become so disgustingly nerfed that both teams would deprioritize it, right? So as a result, the bait would never actually be able to occur. So I doubt it would ever happen. But if it ever does happen, it happened here first, right? You 5-headed the shit out
even if it does happen, Riot will reverse it. So what if they want? Yes. Riot wants fight.
If Riot, you wouldn't want that to exist. Yes, of course.
Riot wants the ideal play to be big 5v5 team fight. So there's no world where Riot would make it, that isn't the ideal play. Well,
by the way, what's hilarious is I'll give one of the random moments where I occasionally ever see the Twitch chat, because I always like to give an update, Veteran, because I just want to remind like Loco how dense his audience is. And so all I'll say
our
is
audience. It's our
problem
fans.
is basically one of the reasons I keep the Twitch chat up, but I don't have it on my screen, is I just want to check if my actual camera goes off because of my connection, or whether I'm like if your stream's still on, I know it's still working. So when I checked there, right, I just saw a comment where someone said now that they were like something like, haha, non-pro is explaining to a former coach how the game works. Did you just hear the part before where I explained how all the world champions in League of Legends from Korea don't understand basic concepts about the neutral objectives in the game right now? And by the way, do you imagine they were all taking the year off in fucking, like, what, do you think they were all out in Cancun or something for the last year? No, they've spent all year grinding. Even more mad, this is the part I don't think people understand. Like, let me emphasize one last time how weird this is. It's not like Cloud Templar is just making a tweet. He's fucking watching the game while he incorrectly explains it. It's like me just watching a game of, like, if I just want to watch Rainbow Six and did a fucking VOD review now, at the end I was like, it seems like that hammer you could smash a wall with, that's probably OP. It's like, that's about how much value Ambition was adding to that fucking stream.
I think it was, I actually didn't go back and watch it, but one thing I will say is Cloud and Ambition have been very, like, anxious about SKT and very anxious about Korea this year. Like, they haven't been like, oh, SKT gung-ho, like SKT is going to win. Okay. Of course, they are on the side of, we think SKT will win. We think this and this will happen. We think like Faker will play extremely well. We're going to see the rise of Korea again. That's definitely what they have been pitching, but it hasn't been like, of course, Korea is the best.
I have a question for you, actually. Because to be fair, we should probably shade this context in, right? Since you said that the person on those like Korean stream broadcasts where it was showing the predictions of the G2 games, since you said the person who actually predicted G2 was the person whose job is LEC,
that's
right?
The thing.
Is there an implication that we should consider built within that because he's the LEC one, he's allowed to pick G2, but the others in theory would
they asked them.
Would the others be ragged on basically if they didn't?
They definitely would be ragged on, but they asked this guy like, why, like, don't you have Korean pride? He said, I said, I pick with my brain. And, like, analytically, I think this is what's going to happen.
By the way, I'll tell everyone on the Korean broadcast, that's the only person with Korean pride. Because what he showed me is there's a Korean guy that still absolutely understands the game. The rest of you, in your stupid nationalism, and made yourselves look like idiots predicting Dam1 3-0 over G2, you daft motherfuckers. The idea that Nuclear and Beryl were going to fucking win a best of 5 against Perks and Mickey X is so mind-blowing. It's like, again, I as someone who myself don't consider myself an expert, it's like I wonder what the fuck is the person talking about when they make a prediction like that. By the way, I will also say predictions don't have to be obviously absolutely accurate. There's a world in which maybe Dam1 could have won that series. I just think it's crazy that most people picked them, you know.
So I also picked Dam1 over G2, and my rationale for it was after groups, G2 was really struggling with like what kind of identity they would show, and also Wonder, Yankos, and Mickey X all had really, really questionable performances in groups. So I actually don't think it was unreasonable to pick Dam1. It wasn't like clear cut G2 will win.
So here's the thing. You know, go on.
Can I go in on that? Yeah, because I've worked with some of the players on G2 before, and actually, if they hadn't lost in groups, I wouldn't have predicted them necessarily to beat Dam1, because if they dropped a game to Dam1. There are certain players there where I think on this particular stage it would have been a lot more difficult to recover in series. So I was actually a lot more glad that those losses happened in group stage, because this means that certain players who I'm not naming would be able to get over that particular bump. And actually they did tweet that it did actually help them get over a particular bump that they've always had on these kinds of stages. So honestly their loss kind of made me more confident than going to quarters rather than less. I do somewhat see your argument there, by the way, because they played abysmal in the last 2 games of group stage, right?
And they also didn't have an identity. They kept flip-flopping back and forth, and the third game versus Griffin looked miserable.
A lot of it came down to the specific positions in which jungle support were getting picked off was like completely...
they were behind the map state, and they had to check into
It wasn't just behind the map state, but they were literally not grouping at specific opportunities where they should have been grouping. They were getting caught in isolated scenarios where G2 previously would never have thought of going isolated there. Like even Fnatic in those scenarios, Fox would literally just press S in certain times and then move with Mickey X into deep jungle rather than just oink alone and then wonder why why the fuck he's dying to enemy lane swap as they're coming in and free-manning him, right? But this is stuff that we didn't necessarily see from G2 in Europe too much. So when it became clear in the last 2 games that not only were they having a bad day, but they're actually going to get punished for having a bad day, I became a bit more confident about them. But that's more like insider info stuff. I do understand like the G2 that showed on the last day of groups. I wouldn't necessarily predict that to beat Damwon either, but I figured that became more of a mental thing because of how many games I've seen G2 play differently to how they played out there.
So I think there is like a legitimate argument to be made. Like G2 could have lost versus Damwon from the performances we saw in groups. Like Veteran is going off of like G2 in the past has leveled up when they lost game. G2 in the past have like been more serious after they see the kind of problems, and they're really good problem solvers. But from the games that was shown in groups, I think it is completely legitimate to make that prediction.
It's a better argument than saying Korean solo queue, so I will accept it.
What do you think in terms of like the angle that, right, so going into this final now, one of the problems is, even though I actually feel like basically I think the narratives for this final are fucked up, unfortunately, because even though I noticed like the biggest problem is the only narrative people are building for FPX is fucking Doinb, because all of you are such fucking plebs. You don't ever watch the other regions. So as a result, to you, it's novel that Doinb even exists in real life. Like the rest of us have been watching the motherfucker for 3 years, but you're all still caught up on the thing. Oh, and he's picking wage stuff in the mid. Did you see him build? Just got to say how far behind are you? How fucking far behind are you on this? Like, so the problem is, everyone's made the whole storyline about FPX just like, can Doinb win? Doinb's a cool guy. Do you know he has a wife? Like, stuff that has nothing to do with the game. So as a result, I actually feel like to a Western audience, unfortunately, I do think a lot of the Western audience thinks this is like a slam dunk and like G2 can't lose. Like, to them, they think they've already done the hard work beating SKT. So in the actual final, what do you actually think like the parity is, Veteran? Like how much of a chance does FPX have? How much of a chance does G2 have? What do you think?
So
that's fair.
I mean, because
I feel like it's a lot closer than, you know, it looks on paper with those narratives.
If it's a G2 and SKT, particularly G2 from Game 4 versus SKT, I think it's a 3-1 for G2 again. Which has basically been the score I've been predicting for G2 every single matchup they've had in quarters and semis. I think it would be 3-1 for them again. I think it's a lot more down to jungle support. Like, I can't really suck Tien and Crisp off any more than I already have for to draw attention away from Doinb.
You've been pretty fair, yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, obviously they are really insane players. They are facilitating Doinb, and in return, Doinb facilitates the rest of the team, which is like the opposite of how we normally talk about fundamental carry versus support carry positions, right? They break the rule in that sense. I don't think they get to break those rules if mikyx and Jankos are playing at peak performance, not even necessarily peak performance, but acceptable for Jankos and peak for mikyx. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be 3-1 for them. I think that there are definitely going to be some drafts that FPX will pull out that they're just not going to be prepared for. They haven't faced a team like FPX in this regard,
that's part of the problem,
entire tournament, right? So I could still see them dropping a game. But I still ultimately think it's going to be a G2 victory. I have a weird angle on this where I honestly don't really care so much if they win the whole trophy, because they've already done the thing that I really wanted them to do, right? Which was they beat both of the Korean teams. They've made it pretty much unquestionable that yes, you can be the best if you conquer Europe, right? Like
let's be real, but the team of the year whether they win the final.
Wait, no. That matters. That matters so much for rookie players. It matters so much for rookie players. The current generation of rookies, it's not even a question for them if they can be the best in the world or not. And it's because we have examples like G2, and I think G2 have done that whether or not they win the world finals. I obviously want them to win. I'm obviously predicting them to win, but for me, I think they've done the job. They've done it beautifully, and I think they've changed Europe for the better, and I'm really grateful to them for it.
100% agree with all those things you said, except for one thing: if you conquer Europe, you're the best in the world. Like,
G2, you probably want to sell Gorilla to a bunch of other teams, so you can't have them think that, right?
No, G2 isn't good because they're the best in Europe. Like, G2 is good. Like, it's not like rest of Europe was challenging G2 in ways like international teams weren't. Like, G2 is...
No, they got to fight here. This is I think you've just missed one step of the point now, Loco. It's not a big deal. All he's saying is this. If a team like G2 is the best and they're in Europe, well, now you know if you get to G2's level or beat them, you could have been the best in the world, right? Yeah. In the past, if Fnatic was the best in Europe, you got to their level, you might still just be like 5th best in the world. That's all he's saying is in terms of like, it changed the paradigm of how you think if you're not G2.
if these teams work to be the best in Europe, if these players work to be the best in Europe, if they become the best in Europe, there's no reason why they shouldn't think, I can take the Summoners Cup now. There's no reason why they shouldn't come in thinking this is their tournament to lose, right? This is what we said about G2 at MSI. Obviously, you said it without an example of them actually winning. Like, this was their tournament to lose. I want every European team to have that kind of mindset coming in. It's the only way they're going to have the competitivity. They can see themselves holding it, then one day they will be holding it. And now it's unquestionable for the next generation of rookies. They can see themselves holding it in the future. And that's almost entirely down to G2. So,
right. What about? Actually, we haven't talked much about Doinb, funnily enough, because as I've just mentioned, unfortunately, because people tunneled on it as the one thing to talk about with FPX, whereas actually it's just the first thing you talk about with FPX. That's my point. After that, there's a million other things that are way more interesting. Like, for example, how does Doinb play is way more interesting than who the fuck he is as a person. Like, I don't find dancing and having a wife particularly amazing qualities in a League of Legends player. I like what they do inside the server. So, look, Veteran, one thing I'll say is this. I don't blame you. I know it's the same with Monty. I know many people, basically, when they see players like Doinb initially, they're like, holy fuck, is this just some stupid gimmick that everyone's getting hyped? Like, you know, when you see him playing like some of the ridiculous Righteous Glory builds he did this year, etc., and some of the tanks that he plays made. But, like, how is your thoughts on Doinb evolved then? Because, like, the key thing for me is, that's why I never found that Nemesis comment at all. Actually, like on the surface, I didn't find it controversial at all. Like I don't think he's a super strong player. But the one area that, to me, it actually showed Nemesis up is it showed me that Nemesis didn't understand anything except being a laner and shooting people in team fights. Like he didn't understand like what he does in the 2v2. He didn't understand that these stupid builds aren't stupid builds. He's doing it for what he wants to do in the game. So even if you might not think it's the ultimate way to play League, like if you had Rookie, you wouldn't play mid lane that way. It's kind of like a very clever way to play. Like I think there's an element of genius in it to me.
This is the broad-based stuff that even people outside of League of Legends who just have experience in like sports and stuff like this, and you who have experience in a lot of games will understand, but players themselves who look at the game very objectively in terms of the interactions of in-game won't necessarily understand. Doinb makes the game easier for his team to play.
Especially for his jungle. Especially for his
jungle, but for everyone. This guy's fucking giving someone the timings like in the middle of team fights, right?
Sure.
And he picks, and he picks champions that are primarily enablers, right? Which allows LWX and Gimgoon to not necessarily be the best players in the history of the world, but they're workable enough when they're on a team with Doinb that when it comes to these group situations, Doinb will make the game as easy for them to clean up as possible, right? Not necessarily of high damage threats, but with stuff like Nautilus, right? Like, there were so many isolations that he caused that made LWX and Gimgoon job very, very easy. So it's not even just the jungle support aspect, though obviously he makes it easy for them as well with the amount of setup he provides and the amount that he gives back in terms of control when they unlock him. But he makes just the game so much simpler, which makes the decisions that you have to make so much easier to make, and it makes you so much more confident in it. You could put a lot of other players in other positions, and Doinb would be able to make them better players as well. However, they are also capped by Doinb, right? Like, eventually they will meet up against mid laners that are so strong that Doinb will just be the crux, right? They'll meet up against jungle support setups that are so strong that Doinb can't then just scale up and solo carry, right? They're very, very reliant on this system getting off, and the moment it isn't a perfect system by any stretch of the imagination, the moment that it's exposed, it's over for them, right? But so long as this framework works, he makes the game very easy for his players. There's a very strong support player in their mid lane. They have two very strong support players, pretty much. And when Doinb goes to that role, you'll be able to make a much more optimal team based around Doinb. But right now, I think all the value he gives is not as a mid laner, it's as a teammate. And that's, I guess, is what is being underrated by a lot of players. Though I do ultimately agree with Nemesis' statement without even changing it. I think he's one of the worst mids in the tournament. You only have to name 8 other mid laners to be better than him, and that's really not that difficult in the tournament. And then he's already in the lower end, right? So I don't disagree with him at all. I have
a little take on this, actually. Like, first of all, I'll start by immediately addressing like what you just said at the end there, the Nemesis angle, by saying this is the best way I would describe it even to Nemesis, is this: as a mid laner, you're a better mid laner than Nemesis.
Oh yeah,
he's a better League of Legends player than you, though. That's the difference. Like, the impact he can have on the game is much bigger. All you can do, unfortunately, is CS people and then go into a team fight and hopefully give some calls, listen to a few calls, but you're not even this key person. And I'll also say as well, I also think a key thing, as you were describing it there, Veteran, is the reason why you want Doinb is exactly because like his strengths are in different areas. So if you look at his team now, as we just discussed earlier, some of the solos in this team have no business being in a World Championship final contending for the cup. Like they don't just like individually, they just have no business. But Doinb is what activates and enables those players. So I actually think in a team with flawed elements, someone like Doinb becomes even more valuable. Yeah. If you really were making like the Ultimate League of Legends team, yes, of course I would take like Rookie over Doinb, and I would just play a normal game and I would just win the mid lane. But the point here is under a very unique set of circumstances, because basically the last few teams Doinb's in have all been built for him essentially. Like as in he gets to choose the players or he gets to choose how he uses them. He has the ultimate say. Like in the teams he has composed, he is the best player that you could have at that position, though.
There's another thing here, which a lot of people are going to be very happy to hear about, because a lot of them are insecure in this regard. I actually think his seniority matters a lot. He's 24 years old. He has a life. He has a secure life as well. He's a figurehead for these guys to look up to. Like, when I say that my take... like,
seems like he has a great personality as well. He has a very good attitude.
Yes. Your take on it is that he's a better League of Legends player. My take is just he's a better teammate, full stop. And this is not even an intangible, right? Like, across many esports, I'm sure you're thinking of CSGO teams right now that have worked so well because the in-game leader aspect. That guy was not just a really strong at CSGO itself in terms of...
Oh, you set the culture, everything.
Yes, yeah. Doinb is the kind of player who adds all of that. He makes it much easier for the team both on and off the game, and how easy the atmosphere is off the game can matter a lot for your development within the game as well. Doinb's adding so much to him. He's like a team captain, and in game and out of game, and that is something that Nemesis isn't. That many of the mid laners that are better than him aren't, and he's so good in this aspect that it overshadows all of that. But this isn't stuff you can break up a VOD review and be like, this specifically would not have happened without Doinb. Right? You can't do that, which is why a lot of players will miss this kind of thing. But this is on coaches to be able to identify. You have to be able to identify this.
In an eye test, you wouldn't be like Doinb as the strongest player, but he's probably the player that's going to have the most impact if you take him away from FPX. And I think a player he was really similar to is Hai. Like,
yes.
As an eye test, like Hai wasn't the strongest mid laner. In so many ways, Bjergsen was way stronger than Hai. But if you took Hai away from that original C9 roster, I mean, we literally saw what happens when you take Hai away and replace him with a better mechanical player than Jensen. We literally saw what happened.
Yeah, 10th place almost immediately.
I'll even say as well, there's also another benefit that people won't stop and think about, because unfortunately so many top players think like Nemesis. Their metric is like skill and like how many CS you get in the lane or whether you won a hard match. Like they have their own metrics basically. So one thing that even pro players might miss is another benefit you have with Doinb. Like if you do have Rookie or Faker or nowadays maybe Caps as your mid laner, right? One thing that's very positive about that is you can always think to yourself, well, no matter how my game's going, they can just take over the game.
Yeah.
Doinb does that from a brain position. Like one of the things that must be brilliant when you have players, like I say, who have no business being at this level individually. How awesome must it be to think, well, we've got the smartest player in the server every game. We've got a guy who can on the fly figure shit out. Like one of the things I think makes people like Hai and Doinb OP when they're in their prime is it's like having a fucking coach in the game. That's the dream for everyone. Like, there's a reason why timeouts don't exist in League of Legends, guys. It's because the game wouldn't play out the way it does. If a coach could just say, timeout, don't go for this Baron again. Like the games would be so much cleaner. But the reason you can't have that is obviously because League of Legends is one entity, so it would ruin the game. Well, as a result, when you have someone like a Hai, like a Doinb in the game, you're always in a game that otherwise you weren't if you just played out all the lanes normally and the guy just tried to win his lane and only play off priority and stuff. So, like, to me, that's a massive, like, confidence builder for his teammates. Your logic is, like, he'll figure it out. Like, even if to me it's impossible to win this game, he must know what we're doing. I've seen him do it before.
And when they do identify that they do need to replace Doinb, like when they do identify that, I hope they look at the Cloud9 example and realize you have to make up for Doinb somewhere else, right? Because Cloud9 did not make up for the communication black hole that occurred when they removed Doinb, right?
Well, also you don't develop skills if you work with someone that covers for you. Like Tian, Chris, all of the teammates of Doinb don't have skills that a jungler, support, AD carry, a top laner should normally have, because Doinb just does that job for them. So when you remove him, they're going to get shown up in a certain way. It doesn't make them bad players, but they're just going to have to adapt to playing without Doinb.
Optically, they will look that way, which will be very sad, right? Like when Doinb leaves the roster, because he's getting on, right? They'll probably remove him and place him back.
He said he was going to retire before this year, so I assume I would imagine if he wins, he probably just
retire.
Probably a real chance.
Yeah. Like Tian and Chris will suddenly, everyone will be like, they were overrated. Doinb is carrying them, like they did with Meteos, right? But then Meteos went to other teams, and Meteos dominated on those teams, right?
Exactly.
This will all happen with them, and I hope they take that into account, because Cloud9 ended up having to bastardize their whole goddamn roster to fit high somewhere there, because this matters. And Nemesis and stuff will look at movement in game, and I'll agree with them, like, the way that this guy is playing as champions is just not good, right? It's not good. But this matters so much, and we as coaches need to be able to identify that. We as coaches need to be able to identify why it's important. And we haven't. We'll give him credit where credit's due there. But that does not make him one of the better mid laners in the tournament.
No.
It does not. It never will.
I mean, that's also, by the way, something that definitely does apply to every game. Like, there's people in CSGO where it's the same thing, you know, they're not the most skilled at shooting in the game, but if they're like a genius team player or the in-game leader, of course, they can be the best player in the server in terms of what they can... That's why the word impact is a better term than just, like, how they perform or whatever. Like, the concept is, like, how do you even, like, have a knock-on effect on someone else's performance? That's a big deal, so... I agree. I think, like, the Doinb ones is the thing. It's an interesting discussion to have. It's not a very interesting one if you just say, oh, isn't it cool when he does it? Yeah, we get that. That's a whack angle. So what about this then? Let's talk about some other teams in the tournament. Like, just because they're out, we don't have to not talk about them. So obviously we would be remiss if we don't ask what you think about Fnatic at the tournament, because coming in, like, I actually feel, here's what's funny, right? Everyone's going to think I'm just like, he's loving it that he gets to flame them. No, the reason I'm flaming them is because of the unreasonable expectations. Like, people acted as though, you all did this, that them being so close to G2 meant that they were not just close to G2 directly, but in overall parity against the whole field. So in theory, this could even have been a world where it was fucking Fnatic versus G2 in the final, right? Sounds hilarious now, doesn't it, you fucking idiot? Maybe learn the game. Who are you, Ambition's brother or something? Anyway, I know exactly the point. At this point, anyone who's ever touched the big organisation, I'd question anything you fucking say.
You guys tell
that
organisation is amazing. That organisation birthed so much legendary coaches, players, broadcasters. But anyway,
well, to be fair, if it wasn't for that organisation, we wouldn't have had that hilarious 2015 Group D in the World Championship. So yeah, you're right. No, anyway, the point I want to ask was this though. So what do you think about Fnatic generally then, Veteran? In much as, like, obviously the problem with this tournament is, like, now it's actually fine to lose to FPX. It doesn't look as bad now because they made the final, but obviously fans thought they were going to beat them, thought they were going to go much further. I thought they were going to go further personally. So
they also disrespected FPX, like, in the middle of the series.
That's true.
Reckless was like, holy shit, guys, like, these guys are actually good. Like, you can't win LPL if you're bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's also another thing is that I talked about this already briefly. I think what I missed when it came to FPX versus Fnatic is that jungle support matters the most here, right? Like, that's the only reason why FPX look insane, and I basically underwrote that because, let's be real,
But what do you mean? Fnatic has the second best support and the best support in Europe.
Well, I underwrote it because they were against teams that just kill over and die, right? Sure. And don't have good jungle supports at all. But when it comes to Fnatic, if I hadn't been underwriting that, then I would have just predicted FPX over Fnatic every time. But it gets into the real issue, which I've put my life on the line with G2, and I've said this for all my G2 predictions straight up. I expected a version of Fnatic at this tournament that I didn't see until week 2 of group stage, and then that version of Fnatic must have scrimmed, won a bunch of games on FPX and be like, ha! This is us as our best. And
wait, they could have lost games. They could have lost games playing standard, no, and then gone to FPX.
Yeah, either way, right? Like, they're winning games on FPX and scrims, and that gives them the false idea that this is the best way to play, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than play to their strength, which has always been when Hylissang's being able to do Boxer's job for him, right? Which he can't do on Yuumi. He's never been able to do so. Like, we've talked about this so much on Elitist United.
Why you can't, of course.
Like, we've talked about this so much on Elitist United.
That's what I love though, Veteran. Is because what's hilarious is, like, this was their chance to show us experimentally that we were wrong, because they played away from their system.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they fucking lost.
Instead, they showed me that I was wrong to put them so high in my group stage prediction, right? Like, fuck these guys. It looked like they'd figured it out in the G2 games, right? It looked like they fucking figured it out, right? They fucking realised what they had to do, right? But instead, what had happened was that G2 was actually just banning Garen all the time, so they weren't able to go to their crowds. They basically helped them out by banning Garen and Yuumi away from them all the time, right? They didn't catch up. Like, there's no excuse as a European team not to know what the counters to Garen Yuumi were, because I know, and I can talk about this now because we're so far away from the tournament.
Kill Cog Vayne.
Well, Vayne was already kind of known. Mm-hmm. The initial boosters who were doing it were banning Vayne in their solo queue games. But in EU Masters, there were plenty of teams that were scrimming direct counters to Garen Yuumi. Right? So Kayle was a really big one. Doing Kayle with Yi jungle into specifically Jarvan was like a really big one as well. It was impossible to do anything as Garen Yuumi into that. There was just far too much thread, and your slows don't matter here, my man. there were a lot of counters being experimented. We didn't even see, like, basically, Lulu Soraka actually do counter Garen Yumi pretty heavily. You have a lot of things that you can do against them. There's no excuse as a European team not to know this, especially the context that they have. They must know what was going on in scrims in Europe. They must have just not met it at Worlds or something and figured that they were safe against it at Worlds. Like, I have no idea. There's no excuse for them, though. We knew what the counters were coming into the tournament. It was a very, very well-known thing. And then they opt into it. And even if they opt into it in a way that, in a scenario where everyone doesn't know the counters to it, they're still playing away from their biggest strength, which means these guys just had the biggest identity crisis in place that they want to accept when they were strongest, right? And there was no shame in being strong when they were strongest, because this tournament has shown, look who the finalists are, right? Yes. The teams with the best jungle supports. Yep. Like, the jungle supports that work together the best and the most, right? Like, there's no shame in saying, oh no, our optimal setup just happens to be the optimal setup of the world stage, right? There's no shame in that, but they seemed to constantly back away from it. They didn't seem to understand what was actually working out for them really well in Europe. I think the close set versus G2 may have been the worst thing for them. I think they needed to get 3-0'd, have a wake-up call, and realise they need to perfect in a very specific manner. And ultimately, when they opt into these scenarios, they come in, lose, then they're already on the back foot, like you're saying. We could see from the footage and stuff that they very much were in a state where they thought, oh, maybe we just disrespected FPX. Well, great, what are you going to do now? Like, rush a bunch of VODs of FPX and get your scouting up? Like, there's fuck all to do now. Now your mental's already broken because you fucked up at the first stage. Like, I thought G2 would be 3-1 SKT if they won first game, 3-2 if they lost first game, because the first game can matter a lot. That can matter a lot for how much faith you put in, how much scouting you have done, right?
Even just historically, I mean, it's obviously partly psychological as well, but I know there's like a stat. It's the same as in playoff series in
first game waves.
You win game one, you usually get some insane, like 80% chance you win the series.
Psychologically speaking, a victory in the first game basically means you put a lot of faith in the prep that you did pre-game, right? If you're not putting faith in that prep and you're not able to keep it together, then what are you going to as your plan B? Because you don't trust the prep anymore. Now you're thinking up of a new game plan between games in the 15 minutes that you have. That's obviously just not going to work out as well, right? So the moment that they locked in Garen Yumi first, it was like, oh, fucking hell, it's just over, isn't it?
It's a little bit in hindsight, but because now we know there's so much internal drama within Fnatic. When you said even if Fnatic got 0-3, where they would have adapted to like kind of the problems they had, I actually think it would have been worse for Fnatic if they got 0-3.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge gap between well, I guess now that they forced you as second seed to go through the gauntlet, I guess there isn't a huge gap, but there is still a gap, right? Between the end of your
when you're a team that has like a good environment, like time is good for you. You'll fix stuff, you'll learn stuff, you'll get better. A team with a bad environment, time can actually be your enemy.
I disagree on this, because in HGK 2016, I swear to you, if we did not have as much time as we did, we would have gotten eliminated in the group stage, and that's because we didn't have a very strong environment. But when you're with each other and around each other for so long, there comes a point where you basically, what else are you gonna do, right? You basically have to.
You can also keep hating each other, and the relationship can keep getting worse.
Well, in my experience, it hasn't ended up working out that way. But in the short term,
it's crazy that Loco understands that in relationships things can go well, but then they can deteriorate. He can't understand that concept for rookie players in League of Legends.
What,
guys? In his mind,
wait, what?
Again, I'll ask the audience. When a rookie player performs well in his first split, does Loco not immediately apply the model? What if he improves 10 to 20% next split and just keeps getting better? Like,
that's completely not true. I only say that if they play for TSM. Not for everyone.
So people give up easier if everything.
Listen, mate. The way you love fucking swords, smash it. The way you love swords ruining the top lane of games. You'd think you were a massive fan of Broken Blade, fucking straight fire. Keep going, veteran.
So the way it works in my experience is that if you have a horrible environment and you have it for, like, say you have a horrible environment and you have 1 week until like your third place game, right? That's when someone is way more likely to give up and just be like, I'm literally just not going to try right now. Like, I just want to go to NA, blah, 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 like, screw all of that shit, right? Like, that's when that's going to happen, because they see we have a week, it's impossible, right? When you have 2 months of a Korean bootcamp or something, then they come in, and then they're less likely to have given up on the first day, right? Because there's so much time, right? Now, obviously, if things don't go well, then it can just cascade and it's all over, right?
Yeah, of course.
Then that's on me, that's
just
on
hearing the stuff we've heard about this Fnatic roster, you don't don't think. Also, my mic is good, so I fixed it up.
Loco, listen, there's actually a very interesting discussion we can transition into here that I actually think you'll be really interested in, because whenever we have that discussion every year, why does NA do badly? Why does EU do well? One of the secrets people don't know is one area where also actually some of the regions can be contrasted. Here's a weird area, right, where I would actually contrast. Normally people contrast like Europe and Korea and then NA and China. I'll do the opposite. Because an area that actually NA is like Korea and China is like Europe is in Europe and China, we don't consider it the end of the world to argue and to have a difference of opinion. We actually consider sometimes that you can like iron sharpens iron. You can kind of battle each other.
I argue with you all the time. I understand that.
The problem is in Korea and in North America, their whole approach is like they're obsessed with the concept of respect in a way that I actually think is like misapplied to team games. Like they think, for example, that you should never talk back to the person who's the coach. You should never argue with the leader.
Oh, really?
So as a result, you don't get the same. Like the difference is you can actually have like a positive kind of like clash of
argument.
ideas,
You can have,
which doesn't always happen. Like you're talking about when it goes negative, obviously that can absolutely happen. But what I would say is this: I think you would be amazed how many great European League of Legends teams were having like arguments that you would probably never believe were going on. Meanwhile, like from the outside, you would just assume, oh, they must have all been best friends. Like, no, like in Europe somehow, I don't know why. I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but we just kind of like it's not as big a deal to us to be kind of like hostile in a way,
No, this is also the biggest complaint that Europeans always give to me when they come back from North America. The few that do come back and didn't just like drink the Kool-Aid, accepted the money and be like, you know what, everything is fine. Everything is fine.
Maybe they just like freedom.
In their eyes. Yeah, sure. The freedom to lose as much as humanly possible.
They are free as fuck when they get the worlds. You're right.
It's very true. It's very true.
And they do get dominated, so freedom, yeah.
Maybe they just like Asian girls.
I'll tackle two things. One, I'll respond to him, then I'll respond to Foreign. So response to you is that in the Fnatic case, so I obviously said like if everyone starts not giving up and you are able to improve from there, then that's really strong, and that's more likely to happen if you have a bad atmosphere in a long time, because they won't just give up at the start like they will at a week, right? And then it comes a lot on coaching stuff, and I have a lot of faith in Youngbuck, right? I have a lot of faith in Youngbuck as a coach. He's a 6-star general and all that, and from personal experience and personal conversation I had with him,
it's not a gripe against Youngbuck. It's from what we've heard, the environment was fucking bad.
I literally just assumed you forgot Youngbuck was on that team, don't worry. I didn't assume that you were like flaming Youngbuck or something. And then in response to Foreign's point, a really good example that I want to give on that is that apparently what happened with that OMG super team from 2015, remember in spring they were supposed to be the super team, right? They had like...
This is when Uzi I joined.
Yeah.
Like, cool and go-going.
Cool and go-going, Uzi I Loveling, all that
it was supposed to be the Chinese super team, legit.
They had Korean coaches, okay? And they're Korean coaches on that team. On that team specifically, they're Korean coaches, and
that makes no sense. They had 0 Korean players.
Yeah, so they were all Chinese players.
Yes.
It's China, man. This is season 5. Remember, like
so they were already semi-famous, like infamous, I guess, because Going and Cool would always argue, right? For 8, they would just yell at each other, right? Okay, but it worked because they would yell at each other. They would actually kind of come to a conclusion, even if they were like, "Fine, fuck you," and like slam the door in each other's face and shit like this. But they would come to some sort of conclusion, right? What happened was the first time they started doing their argument, apparently, in front of the Korean coaches separated them into different rooms, so they weren't allowed to talk to each other until they were fine to come out. So they never had these discussions they were having. They
never resolved anything.
They never had the discussion they were having in the previous situation of OMG, and that was like the culture clash that prevented that team working, because they didn't understand that this was actually, even though it looks super toxic, this is actually working out for them at the time. That's always like the running story of that version of OMG and what ended up kind of not making them so good, right?
One thing I don't understand with what you guys are telling me is like China, you guys group with Europe instead of grouping with Korea. Like both China and Korea like have such huge like back history with Confucius culture, and that's where the whole respect your elders come from. Like, so why would China be different from Korea in terms of like how arguments are done and like how respect is given?
A large amount of that is that in Chinese League of Legends, they don't have the coaching hierarchy that Korea.
But they would normally in just cultural, like growing up and like just being like Chinese and like growing up in China.
Okay, well then I can tell you that in my experience, that just isn't how the Chinese operate within teams.
I would just say this, Loco.
They are
my
with each other like,
experience
fuck.
of asking similar questions has been that in Korea, they very much do, as you say, still hold the Confucian like social aspects of like never like disrespect the coach, like don't speak out against teammates, like definitely don't disrespect like a bad teammate but who's older than you and has been in the team with more tenure. The difference is, I actually, if I had to guess, I think what has changed the Chinese culture in that sense is like just materialism. Well, like, the problem is this, like the number one problem, like obviously OMG is a different example because they were all Chinese, but you know this story, Loco. Most of the big name Koreans who went over there were instantly treated like they were like a 14-year-old fucking rich kid's daughter at his birthday party, like, but I wanted a pink pony for my team. Like half of them just get catered to, like they don't, their coach doesn't tell them what to do, they fucking tell everyone else what to do.
Actually, someone in the chat, Croissant, actually, hi Croissant, brought up a very, very good point actually that I would say to you, is that even though they both had a Confucian background, China went through the Cultural Revolution, which is literally...
They literally had a communist revolution.
Yeah, they literally had a revolution based around tearing down those specific structures.
Exactly.
That's literally what it's based on, yeah.
Basically, the point is this, look, I don't know if you know this, but part of this revolution supposedly in China was that they killed off like old elders, etc. So I'm going to guess they just disconnected that aspect of their culture, unfortunately.
I mean, at that point, Korean culture and Chinese culture diverges massively. The aspects that keeps the hierarchy so strong in Korea are no longer there in China. Like the Cultural Revolution was done with this aspect in mind. They break down all these hierarchies.
Basically, Loco, to test this out, we need to start League of Legends in North Korea.
Wait,
that's actually pretty good, isn't it? As a control group, that's the way to do it.
The thing is, you know there are certain aspects where Korea has been really against Confucius culture, and like they've been trying to develop against it. So like way back in like early 2000s, Korea had so many airplanes crash, way more so than like normal airlines, like Korean airlines. So like we got kicked out of, like there is like an airline club where like you're the safe like good airlines, like we got kicked out of that airline. So they had external people come in and kind of like figure out like why are Korean airplanes crashing way more so than other airplanes.
Cloud Templar was navigating all of them. He's like, this is a safe landing, straight in the ocean. Oh my god! Oh, go on, tell me.
So they have a hierarchy. They have a captain, and then they also have like a co-captain, right? But the captain is like much older and has much more respect. So when the co-captain like finds out like there's a problem with it, like he'll ask the captain like, "Oh, it looks like hazy today," where he means like, "Dude, like we need to like change like how we're doing things right now." I think maybe like we should like recourse like here, like they would give very suggestive terms and they would like talk around like the subject. So it actually caused like so many problems where the co-captain wasn't efficiently like doing their job. So when Americans came in and they told them like, yo, this is the problem, like this kind of like hierarchy you have within like your pilot and like your cockpit system is fucking you. And like your co-pilots are actually calling out problems that are happening before the airplane is crashing. So what they did, Korean Air, they made everyone learn English. And whenever you are piloting planes in Korea, like you're supposed to speak English instead of speaking Korean, because in Korean there's naturally like honorifics built in. So, and with English,
it just makes the dynamic different, I imagine.
Yeah, so with English, there isn't like honorific. I mean, there is honorifics, but you can speak without honorifics. So yeah, all Korean airlines and all Korean pilots speak English, and yeah, we've been really good in terms of like airline safety after that.
I know nothing about airline safety or anything like this, but Jamie pulled that up.
But that's like Korea has recognized that as a problem in like systems before, like where the culture is actually working backward and causing more problems.
Yeah, well, it's like that's obviously one of the problems also, that actually like people will recognize this if they followed League a long time. So in the beginning of League, people really just played in their own lanes and maybe a little bit shot called. Then you had people who were the shot caller, but in the meantime, some teams like CLGU, for example, famously tried to do it by committee. And the real problem is this. I've explained this point a million times, but I'll do it very quickly. The problem is a lot of people get lost on the concept because they don't understand that sometimes an advanced concept actually looks like a lower level resolution concept. So think of this. If you start off with 5 players and it's a democracy, anyone can say what the call should be. And in fact, like CLGU, on the fly, you discuss. And so what happens is like Wicked says, well, I think we should go in. And then Fogan says, no, pull back and find the wave. And then Krepo goes, no, it's the right time. And then what happens is you just hope based on like who shouted the loudest, who seemed the most confident, who the general sentiment is. Generally, as a group, you hope you pick one and you go with that action. The problem with that is that will never be as coherent as one really good shot caller who just looks at the whole map. And as you're saying with the Korean pilot, he makes all the decisions. So the idea is win or lose, you can blame this guy for a lot because he had a lot of the agency. The problem is the ultimate mode to have is obviously the mode where you transcend past that back to 5 people having a say again, but they do it with itself a mini hierarchy. So what happens is the jungler has autonomy over things that are in the jungle, but might take cues from the lane. The laner might have say over his matchup, but might not have a say over when you group. Like, you add hierarchy, but you give each people agency. Because obviously, as much as it's more OP to have one person battle 5 who are separate, it's way more OP to have 5 who have a similar way of thinking, be able to collaborate and beat one guy who only has the limited information. Because the problem in that analogy Loco gave is the pilot can't watch the instruments of the guy who's the co-pilot. So he needs actually the co-pilot to take a little bit of agency, but know what his general flight concept is and just feed the info to him. So that's actually an area I think a lot of people get lost. It's also why, by the way, I get mad triggered every time Kelsey starts telling me, like, you know, there aren't really shot callers. I mean, like, I was ahead of you about 10 years on that concept, for fuck's sake. You were the guys telling me that, like, Chowston was the god like 7 years ago. Anyway, whatever.
Okay, but there's a really good way I can bring that back into League of Legends, which is that Doinb is like the one-shot caller kind of deal, right? And the reason that one-shot caller works way better in games than it does in real life is because one-shot caller in games can make decisions to get you all killed and you don't actually get killed, right? But if you're all decisive and going in on the one-shot caller's decisive call, you have something to learn from, right? And we talk about this a lot when we talk about Caps development, leaders development, all this, right?
You can figure out if you made the wrong choice, you
can actually figure it out.
The variable,
Exactly, G2 have 5 people making decisive calls, but when someone makes a call, everyone commits to that call. We've seen this time and time again. Every time we've heard G2's comms, there's not like a single individual guaranteed shot caller who takes precedence over everyone. No one has to sign off when someone else makes a call. Just if Mickey makes a call, they'll all go in on that. If Wanda makes a call, they'll all go in on that. If Caps makes a call, they'll all go in on that, right? Anyone can make these calls, everyone will go in on it. And G2 have developed so fast because they all have that trust, that bond of each other, right? That's where the atmospheric out-of-game stuff matters so much, and that's where Doinb being able to make that sort of atmospheric thing for his team, make everyone implicitly trust him and be decisive on his calls, matters so much for them. G2 have just had that across 5-man for the entire period, and then Grab's job as a coach isn't to be like, we are doing this every time. Grab's job as a coach is to make sure the trust remains between all 5 of them, because so long as the trust remains between all 5 of them, this is always going to be the fastest developing team in League of Legends for sure, and that was always going to translate in-game later. But this isn't stuff where I can point in-game and be like, if they hadn't had this system, this play would never have been possible, right? So you can't really do this from VOD reviews. This is stuff we just kind of like have to know. Yeah, that's how
bringing this back a bit anyway, because obviously we were talking earlier about Fnatic. I can actually bring this back to that topic of like what's going on behind the scenes, because I'll say first of all, even though some of the stuff has been leaked, like the Law comment on that podcast, obviously Reckless and Nemesis made their own comments. Sadly, actually, most of the behind the scenes drama isn't out at all and may never be. It's the sort of thing that you just hear, and if anyone doesn't know, most shit never comes out. You never really find out who the bad team is, because really you only find out if someone says it on a stream or an interview, don't you? You don't tend to actually get proper leaks. So I'll just say this: I don't think it'll all come out, because actually, as I say, most times a lot of it doesn't. But I will say I hope some of the stuff comes out behind the scenes, because all I'll say is this: like, I'm not just saying this because it's funny, it's just also actually just satisfying. But like, me and Veteran literally were like all over Fnatic this year. Like, we had the best read of them by far. As in, like, literally the players that we said weren't that good were the players who had issues internally, and then like, who was the guy that we gave all the credit to? First of all, Hillsang, when he actually did his fucking job. And then Youngbuck as a coach, because Youngbuck actually found all the band-aids. Like, I actually think, even though they only made top 8, holy fuck, dude, this guy made 3rd in his first split without his best player, by the way, a game changer. Second split, he took the team that's about to complete the fucking Grand Slam to the limit. Then he went to Worlds in a group I actually didn't even think they'd get out, so props even getting out. And then they didn't win the quarterfinals, but it wasn't impossible they could have won. So I actually think, holy fuck, is Youngbuck a good coach?
Yes.
And by the way, based on everything I've heard, Loco, he isn't even the guy he's not an X's and O coach at all. Like, people never give any like secret stories behind the scenes, like, oh, you should see this genius thing he came up with. But they tell me like the things that he works on in terms of like the intangibles, and then the like personal fixes between people's relationships, like people who can't get along or can't communicate. Like, based on what I've heard, I'm not exaggerating, he's the best coach in the entire world of League of Legends. There's nobody better.
He might be. He may well be.
There might be. There's better people in X's and O's. I've never heard of anyone who's doing the shit he's doing in terms of like look, what more could have gone wrong this year, and he's still got top 8 in World.
It's
That's
really easy.
Insane.
There's almost zero doubt that you can't have a conversation about the most effective coach on the planet without talking about Youngbuck. That's not possible. That's absolutely not possible. And you're trolling if you think it is possible. Like I think he's the most effective coach in the world, obviously, because I think he's the most effective coach in the best region. But he has to be brought up in every discussion to this regard.
I always try to stay away from coaching discussions, especially stuff like Europe.
Except when it's people you hate like Prolly, and then you just go ahead and talk shit. So yeah.
I also spoke well of Prolly, but anyways, regarding the Youngbuck situation, you guys got the information because you guys do content with Youngbuck, and also hearing background stories regarding Fnatic, and also hearing about how much problems Fnatic has.
Sure.
I think it's very hard for outside perspective, without all those external information, to be oh, Youngbuck's a great coach.
By the way, I'm not saying it as an objective statement. I'm just saying based on the things I've been aware of around the world. I've never heard of a coach. Basically, okay, here's the best way to say it. He's actually one of the first real coaches I'm aware of in League of Legends. The rest of them are just fucking analysts. He's doing actual coaching. He's finding two players who can't get along and making them not only operate in the game, but beat the best team in the fucking world. That's absurd. If people actually find out, first of all, you've already seen the in-game shit. Did you like Broxah when he got to Worlds? That's who you guys were standing for the whole year. Did you think Whipple was a god by the end? Was Nemesis actually the beast he thought he was? Or was he just... here's the sad thing. I'll go the other way. You know what? Normally, Loco, when it's TSM, when I say they're shit, I would crow and be you're shit and that's what's funny. You know, the sad thing is what I actually find funny about this Worlds, but at the same time tragic, is that I actually think Fnatic underperformed at Worlds.
Really?
If they we've already discussed how they could have played the meta very differently. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, look at their team, dude. They don't have a single laner that was below average, at least in this tournament. At least, some of them were, a bunch of them were above, obviously, in theory. Nemesis, perhaps Reckless, depending on what he played. These are good players. So it's not player strength's a problem. Then add in, a thing we barely even discussed, is remember, Fnatic were the ones who innovated doing the 3-2 instead of doing a 1-3-1 or a 1-4. And you saw how insanely effective, Veteran, you see how effective that was against the fucking Korean teams. They didn't know what the fuck was going on. They even had edges in the meta, where I actually think Fnatic, if they'd have played differently, could have gone further. I don't think it's possible.
No, I absolutely agree. I predicted them to beat versus FPX because there's a really obvious version of Fnatic that beat FPX, right? And we could potentially be looking if they.
But how likely is that version of Fnatic to show up?
I thought it was.
Well, the problem is, as we just said, they basically themselves handicapped their own jungler and support, so it was never going to turn up, was it? When you knew that,
it didn't even turn up in draft. That's the issue. All of the strengths that they had were nerfed the moment that they decided to opt into Gawanumi.
Those are decisions they're actively making, and also with all
not in the second week though. They didn't do that in the second week.
That's them overperforming. That's them overperforming.
They overperformed because they didn't overperform. What they did was they performed with not necessarily optimal drafts, but with the drafts that enabled the strongest aspects of them, and looked like they'd realised, oh, this is when we play best in week 2. They just had to pick the same shit and they beat FPX.
You keep the player form, and then you just switch the draft, and you think they win.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know the way Broxah played, and also
if you agreed with me, I'd be less confident on it. So I'm actually kind of glad.
But the way Broxah played, it gives me so little.
He's done this the whole year, dude. He's played like this the whole year.
Oh, Veteran, you know what?
He's never been good.
Then why are you arguing that they would win if you think he's not good?
Because they have a system where he doesn't have to be insane.
Loco, this is the point. This is a real
Reckless told me they had no system.
That's the point. No.
No, Reckless said that they did have a system.
Okay. Youngbuck told me they had no system.
Listen, this is the point he's making basically in this scenario, is that exactly the reason why these flaws didn't show up for people like Broxah every game this year is because they covered it. They actually did. I mean, the problem is I haven't discussed it enough on this show. I'll just do a video for one of these. One of my core concepts of team play is a massive positive of team players if your strength covers your teammate's weakness. And that's what they did in Fnatic. They did a fucking amazing job of it. Dude, at one point in the season... I don't know how much you followed Fnatic, but I'm not joking. At one point in the season, they were borderline using Blippo as a fucking jungler to gank bot lane, mate.
They were.
It was a joke. That's how far they went with the band-aids. It was crazy.
But they're so brittle. If you're so determined, if you're so reliant on your system, and you're covering for weaknesses, like you have so much hold that like your house is like built on sand, like it has no foundation and it's so easy to fall. So I'm so shocked that veterans talking about they just needed their system to work
because it was meta. It was meta. You don't get it. You can't ban it out in this meta. They just had to opt into it.
It was so
Loco, think about this, right? You yourself, I'm going to guess, if you had to rate all the players in FPX, wouldn't put most of them as like the best players in the tournament, right? A bunch of them are just okay. Yeah, but like the whole point is, how did FPX get to this point where they might win the final like you predicted? Because they have a system as well, mate. They have people who cover each other's weaknesses as well.
Yes, but theirs is much more solid.
Listen, this is what Nemesis never understood, is in Season 9 League of Legends, if you could win the fucking game by your mid laner having 10 CS more, we all know whose favourite player would be fucking winning worlds right now. That doesn't exist. Like, in the modern world, the reason why none of Doinb's flaws were able to be exploited by your boy Nemesis, it's because he has fucking TN, and they both cover each other's flaw. Like, I'm going to go ahead and guess what Veteran said earlier is totally right. The day Doinb retires, TN will suddenly become a really sick mechanical jungler who probably has like half the read of the game. Like, he won't be some genius who's always in the right spot. I'd imagine part of that comes from him working with his jungler as mid laner, who's like one of the best shot callers in the game. But when they're both in the game together, you don't see either weakness, do you? Like, I remember seeing some of the games and being like, how is Doinb getting all these kills? What the fuck? Like, I haven't even seen him do a highlight play. Meanwhile, on TN, like I say, he's always in the right spot. What are the odds this is all just independent skills that isn't interactive? They're clearly like a synergy, aren't they? So, to me, I just think in that sense, like, it is logical that Fnatic could have been better. It's just that Fnatic almost, in my opinion, it's almost like they themselves either didn't understand, like Vetra said, what they were doing that worked, or worse, and this is a disturbing narrative, wanted to prove that it wasn't the case, that they only had a limited way to win, which is, by the way, the dumbest move of all time. That's like being a guy who could only win in the UFC by wrestling, and someone goes, we have no boxing skills, and you just go and box like fucking the best boxer in MMA. It'd be the stupidest way to fight, wouldn't it?
I think it's a lot more likely that, like, because obviously we're potentially framing it as maybe they wanted to prove to us, right, that they needed new.
I just mean everyone. I think, even maybe.
Yeah, that's probably more it. That, like, we saw how hard Young Buck played defense after Reckless basically let the cat out of the bag and was like, guys, everything we do is so systemic, right? Like, everyone knows what we're gonna do. Even our mid-late game, like, everyone knows what we're gonna do, right? Like, that's gonna get abused at some point. He says that publicly. Young Buck plays hard defense. I think if you're playing hard defense in that regard, you can never basically say to them, yeah, we can basically only win if we're doing this, right?
By the way,
have to be open to playing.
And as a very quick aside, just for people, because obviously I don't blame, by the way, content creators if you don't watch each other's content. Like, you're not going to watch like 50 hours of Elite United if you're doing your own shows. So one thing I'll just say is this: there's a key difference here, Loco, is that Young Buck himself never like. Here's the thing, he did say they didn't have a system, but even the way he said they didn't have a system is why he's the best coach in the world, mate. Because he was able to say they didn't have a system, but without ever making it just a sentence. Like, he put in loads of context, and he basically just described it with different semantics. Like, what he described was that based around the champions was how they decided the lanes they would play through and the priority they would use. Now, the problem is, that's literally what Veteran was saying in the fucking beginning, was the system. It's just that Young Buck's so smart, he knows, by the way, this ties into what Veteran's saying. He knows his own players probably don't want to think that they're limited and have to play one way. So he's actually not just mind-fucking us, he's mind-fucking them as well. And by the way, he's the best mind-fucker in the world. This guy's incredible. Mind-fucker Season 1 with Young Buck coming next
You make it sound so next level, but this is like half the job of the coach, right?
It's like pull people into thinking.
Yeah, you basically play Inception with them.
You're a good carry player, but right now we need a great tank player, and I think you're even better than tank.
You've had this conversation, haven't you? You've had this conversation, haven't you?
If you had a better AD carry, then you could play carries, but right now I need you to play tanks.
This Reckless guy's a bit, like, he needs a bit of help with her. Like, we'll just put you on Sion whole side, it's fine, you know? This Reckless guy needs a bit of help.
Let's touch on off-season stuff very briefly and end the show, because there's 3 rumors that are very public. So the first one is actually very relevant to what we're talking about. Broxah to TO.
Okay, so I know that there are multiple North American teams that have interest in Boxer. I don't know.
By the way, the key thing to add there, because obviously, like, this hasn't. I don't think this rumor's out there, but it's implied with what you just said, Loco. The other rumor that has been behind the scenes for a while now is that Smithy is going to leave Team Liquid, basically.
Yeah.
Now, I won't say the context, because again, I'm not going to leak shit. Like, I don't have any verified source on any of this. I'm just getting.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to pick up Broxah, and he's not going to share a spot with Smithy, so that is implied.
Yes.
Yeah.
I could see the rumor just happening anyway if you just look at the database and realize, hold up, they can get another import in. Let's look at the Americans, double lift Smithy. Goodbye, Smithy, I guess.
And also, Smithy's contract ends this year.
Yeah, so I know Brox has got an interest from multiple North American teams. They're pretty hot on him. Clearly they haven't read Reddit yet and seen where the wind is actually blowing in this regard. Once they read Reddit, maybe they'll catch up, but that doesn't surprise me. I in terms of, like, as a fit that he would be on that team, I mean, he'll do well in North America. It's really difficult not to do.
You literally just talked about him as, like, a bot, and, like, him just fitting into a system.
But now I'm talking about North America. So now it becomes like a relative thing, right? Now it becomes like
and also, he definitely never, ever, ever even implied Broxer as a bot. Like, I know you're using hyperbole there, but, like, that is one thing that does annoy me, is that, like, most people can't even actually battle the points we're making, hence they have to say, like, wow, so you just hate Fnatic. It's like, yeah, brilliant take. Like, yeah, thanks. If that was a fucking person calling me, I'd just hang up the instant they said that. Like, there's no interesting discussion. No, the thing I want to ask is this, though, Loco. I actually, personally, I'm surprised Veteran thinks Brox will be good. He's doing it because it's the NA region.
Because the teams that have interest in him have such strong mid laners, they'll make up for his flaws. He doesn't really have interest from teams that have horrible solo laners.
Okay.
So I think
but I actually personally think, like, obviously I can't know what the exact Team Liquid lineup will be, because I've heard there might be other room changes as well. But let's imagine, just for the sake of this topic, that it was the same Team Liquid minus Xmithy plus Broxer. I actually think it would be a worse team, because one of the things, as much as people have dissed Xmithy for not being like his gank machine, I actually think one thing that made his team so, I would say the thing I liked about Team Liquid was, very rarely did Team Liquid ever get stomped. Actually, basically, that G2 finals about the only time. What normally happened with Team Liquid was
they're very good at keeping up.
They remind me of that saying, you know, in the NFL, like, if you don't have an amazing defense that can just stop you dead, what you do is you try and make a defense called one that can bend but not break. Like, you give up runs, but you just contain them generally. You just don't give like a 100-yard run. You know, maybe you give a 20-yard and you get tackled the guy. Like, they were like that. It's like, you could definitely beat Team Liquid, but they'd always look like they were, like, vaguely in the game, or they'd get to, like, a decent mid-game state. I think Xmithy was a lot of that, because think about what I said with Doinb earlier. If you're a laner and you're on Team Liquid and you have Xmithy, you know this guy's following everything on the map. He knows where to be. You know if he's coming to your lane, it's the right time. If he's not, then you have to play self. Like, I think he actually sets the tone for that team beautifully. So to me, Broxer lacks a lot of the kind of brain elements that I think Xmithy brought. Maybe he can be a better mechanical jungler. I'm not sure.
Actually, I actually do agree with you thinking about it again. So obviously North American teams aren't my expertise, so sometimes I have to think a bit to remember what's on them. But
I just mean stylistically for that one, you know. I feel
they're
like
stylistic, but, like, this is something else people were always harping on us about how could we possibly know this, right? But, like, it's inarguable now. We've seen so much from Fnatic. It's inarguable that Broxer is not a strong communicator, right? That's inarguable at this point, right? That's inarguable. There will probably be a black hole of communication in mid jungle if he goes to Team Liquid, right? As far as I understand, Xmithy
is very vocal and he's a shot caller, but he also is, like, very good at kind of sometimes you have, like, fiery personalities on the team, like players like Doublelift, and you have to account for them, and you also have players like Jensen, who is a decent communicator but sometimes can shut down in communication, and you have to make up for people. Broxer seems like a nice dude, but he doesn't seem like someone that would, like, make up for holes in communication, where that was a huge strength of Xmithy. Like, great teammate and always, like, there for you in and outside a game. So I think Xmithy is a really big glue piece on TL.
Here's the thing, though, I'll tell you this, Veteran, you might appreciate this, right? The reason why this is hilarious if this move happens is because one of the few times, like, in the modern day, when Doublelift flames people, he's usually just doing it as part of his persona and for fun, or he takes what he really thinks, like I'm going to win the game, and he just adds a bit of spice for entertainment. But like, one of the rare times in the last few years, I have seen him legit flame someone for being bad, like almost like the old Doublelift came back, was Yellow Star. Like, famously, because what he always says is this. He always says, like, either Yellow Star was never good, or I just never got the good Yellow Star. Like, maybe he just never made it across the Atlantic, basically. Because he said he thought I was going to get this, like, God-tier shot caller. The guy knew how to run the lane. Like, and he said, basically, when he arrived, it was like having the corpse of that player. Well, here's the irony, of course. Every idiot fan, by the way, well done, Europe. We've successfully sabotaged NA again. All of your stupid comments for the last year are forgiven if Broxer joins Team Liquid, and you trick Doublelift into thinking he's now getting the super genius jungler, and then he's going to be, again, thinking, like, why do I keep getting these fucking, like, corpses from Europe that people tell me are sick, and then I have to carry him around the map? Like, he's going to hate that guy, mate. I will say, to be fair, it's not like it can fail entirely. Like, having core JJ is a pretty good start if you want to integrate Broxer. I'm sure that'll help. That guy seems like a fucking brilliant shot.
One thing Colin Coward has said, and that's also been so true, is, like, dynasties end so much quicker than you expect them to. Like, you expect dynasty, like, go on and, like, slow down, but it's usually like a drop, right? Like, for Golden State Warriors, like, it's been a fucking drop, right? It's not a slow decline. So if TL Dynasty does end, I do think, like, Xmithy was a huge piece that just wasn't very appreciated. So I'm not going to bet against TL and say like they're going to do badly next year, but it wouldn't surprise me if they initially have huge problems and they have to work through it.
Put it this way, I mean, I've said this many times on this show, I actually think on the totality of the year, Xmithy was underrated because everyone just acted every single time like everyone acted like he was like Khan when he first went international, like he was going to into every international game and just get his shit pushed in. Like, no, Xmithy's always been very reliable. I'll just say this, I definitely don't think he was the best jungler even for this meta, but the only players I want to upgrade Xmithy with is if you can get like fucking Svenskeren or Jankos, like really, really high level ones that are going to... And by the way, you know,
be good glue pieces. Yeah.
And I'm also picking people fairly self-sufficient, if you notice. I'm not just picking like I'm not saying my boy Dardoch should go. Like obviously he would have no shot calling skills at all. So like no, like I don't mind upgrading. I just don't think this is the right move. Personally.
Every year as well, like both Xmithy and Meteos are like always getting offers from basically every North American team. Like these guys are very high in demand because they fill a very specific niche. I don't think you want to give up that niche for proxy.
They're very good. They can bring their own system and they can also fit in. I don't think Meteos can fit into systems, but Xmithy can pretty much fit into any system.
I mean, Meteos is probably more of a player that you'd build from, right? You'd kind of center around him.
Yeah. So there's another one that I'm going to touch on briefly, and we can skip over, like Steve, like following Tarzan and like Tarzan's TL being a rumor. So like why it's picking up steam, I'll explain to you, is...
This guy's so brain dead, by the way. He's so bad in Europe. He was so bad.
The thing is, I'm going to go ahead and guess. Loco, surely Tarzan has longer than a 1-year contract.
So no. We're talking about, let's be clear, we're talking about Griffin Tarzan, not the solo queue Tarzan.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
No. That veteran got lost on that one.
Yeah, I was like, wow, you
Tarzan
really don't.
Was so bad.
So we're talking about Griffin Tarzan, and the thing is, like, there's a rumor that Korea is going to void all the contracts of Griffin. I don't think that rumor is true, because if that rumor is true, like, we would know by now. Like, that is such a big news. I think people would already know. So I don't think
that's equivalent to when Rock's Tigers broke up. I'm pretty sure that news would come out surely.
And also, like, Steve does this thing every year where he'll get like a player on his like whiteboard, and then he'll just go down the list. If we're replacing like jungle, he'll be like, okay, who's my number 1, who's my number 2, and there's like no limitations. Like, you can pick anyone in the world, and I'm pretty sure
that's by the way, props to him. What a cool approach.
So I'm pretty sure that's why Tarzan's on that list. Like, he probably had Tarzan on his number 1, and he's saying, okay, what can I do,
by the way,
to make this 1% happen?
Move, if he's really going to do that, like, you know, offer $1 million or something like that, that's even a genius move. Because, you know, when I was describing before Xmithy's style of playing and what I would want, like, Tarzan is basically a better version of Xmithy with the best mechanics for a jungler. Like, that would even be a sick fit if you... I mean, obviously, you'd think the language barrier would matter, but then again...
They have Core JJ, Kane, FPX Dodo.
I think that would basically... like, listen, obviously, it's not like a very reasonable move that would happen, because does a player want to go from Korea? Doesn't often happen. But if you could do it, I think that would be an insane move to do. What a blockbuster trade.
Does he speak good English? I'm asking you not.
I have no idea.
I'm asking for like the
no idea. And also,
I would be surprised if he spoke any English, because he's fairly.
In which case, the shot call aspect might be like. I mean, at least for spring, it's not really gonna matter, right? Obviously, he'll probably do quite well in North America, but it won't make them better internationally.
Right, let's go to the second rumor. So the second rumor is European AD carries coming onto C9. I actually really hate this rumor, but it is a rumor, and I'm hearing it from multiple sources, so I'm going to give credibility and not say like this rumor is false. But why I hate this rumor is AD carry as a role is such a bad role to import historically for North America. Like Bang, Piglet, Zben, like all these AD carries that are big names that come over, like it's just really hard to make it work because one, you don't really have agency as a role, and also solo laners in North America is extremely weak. The sheer fact that you have to use one of your import slots on non-solo lane is a huge detriment. So I really hate this rumor.
I know a lot of the players that they've offered. They've offered both rookies and like veteran players. I would severely lose respect of any of the rookies.
Wait a minute. I'm confused right now. This doesn't make any sense, right? Loco, I think you said it wrong. Did you mean Korean AD carries?
What do you mean? Import. Just import AD carry. Import AD
you just said what you just said was you said you'd heard rumors that European AD carries were going to go to Cloud9, and then you made a point about Korean imports and the language.
And also Zben. No, not language problems. AD carry as an import. AD carries as an import.
So you think it applies to Europeans as well?
Well, no, just using your import slot on a non-solo laner in North America is extremely detrimental, and AD carry as a role doesn't have that much agency, and you're so dependent.
I know what you mean.
Like,
by the way, the second point's an even better one, which is if you can only have 2 imports. I mean, obviously nowadays people get the NA resident European or Korean and cheat that way. But let's say you can only have 2 imports. I agree. If I had to pick the 5 roles, I wouldn't put AD carry top 2. I would probably have top and mid. It's most logical. But the part that I think you've gone too far by implying like European AD carries are a bad pickup. Like, let's face it.
I know AD carry as an import is a bad pickup.
Like, I'll give you an example. Let's say, forget, because obviously the problem here is we're using all potential AD carries. Let's say I give you an example. Let's say we know who it is, and it's literally Upset, and Upset's going to join Cloud9 tomorrow. You're telling me that's worse than keeping Sneaky or Deathly? I think that's better.
No, Cloud9 is a little bit of a unique case because I think Licorice is a decent North American top laner, but even then, I would love to see what Cloud9 can find in mid lane over Niski before even touching the AD carry position. So
wait a minute, veteran. This is one of the things that's good about this show is there's a lot of settling scores, you know. So the question now for Loco is this: thought you loved Niski, boy. You thought he was a fucking sick player.
I thought he was better than Froggen. I thought he was better than Froggen. Better than Froggen.
And admit it, you were wrong. Admit it right now. You're wrong.
No, he's not. He is better than Froggen. What he's shown this split is better than Froggen.
He's in a way worse team. Guess what? Yeah, and you know what? Why couldn't he show any of that at Worlds, mate? What was he waiting for?
What? Where was Froggen for Worlds? Where was Froggen for Worlds? I didn't see Froggen at playoffs.
Froggen didn't lose a single game at Worlds. I can beat you in any argument because your problem is your tactics, not in what you say. Your tactics are bad. Anyway, whatever. That's by the by.
But okay, what do you think about? What's your point regarding European AD carry for C9? What's your take on it, Duncan?
I just don't think. I agree with you on the premise of C9. It's different because they have Licorice. I agree. The problem is if you have to have a solo laner be from NA. Well, first of all, it can't be the mid laner. If we've just seen historically, NA mid laner except high, it's just a fucking terrible move. LCS because every import's a mid laner, unfortunately. So I agree. The problem is what top laner can you get from NA if you take a European ADC? So Licorice is kind of a cheat on that one.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I agree there aren't many. I mean, there's basically Haunts of Viper. Is that it? Impacts a Resident. Is there anyone else even in top lane that's good? That might be it. That might be it in the entire region. So I agree. It's rough. The difference is, that's why I say it depends who the ADC is. If the ADC is Upset, Forgiven, Reckless, I'll take these fucking people and have an NA top if I have to. These are pretty good players.
I didn't.
You don't agree?
I don't know European AD carries that much, and the names that have been popping up are Kabe, Reckless.
I'll give you an example. Let me put it to you, but I'll give you an actual example. Would you rather have Licorice and Upset, or would you rather have? So I'll give you some really good player. What would be a really good top laner who could have?
Sneaky Alfari.
That's unreasonable. That one, you made that one too bad on the Alfari, on the Sneaky side. I would say, which would you rather have? Would you rather have Licorice and Upset, or you can have, I'll pick a reasonable one for ADC. Let's say Cody Son and Wonder. Which would you rather have?
Cody Wonder? I would have Cody Wonder.
Wait, I'll make it better. Well, do you think Wonder would accept that offer, or do you think
okay, go ahead.
Who was it you had for the Sneaky one?
Kabe, I think. Sneaky Alfari. I have Sneaky Alfari for that.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Do you think Alfari... No, wait. Okay, do you think Wonder accepts the offer with with a North American AD carry, or do you think the European AD carry Upset accepts the offer with Licorice top? Who do you think says yes?
Yeah, that is more likely, isn't it?
Yeah. Who do you think says yes?
I guess I would have to lean towards it. My thing with this is not that it's not that it's not happening. I just don't like this move. It just is so weird for me because they are already developing Deathly. I'm not saying Deathly is going to be a next great North American AD carry, but Cloud9's really budget conscious. AD carry isn't the best role to import. They have so much fan base with Sneaky, and they could always just do Sneaky and Deathly swap. That's been the Cloud9 way. If they feel like they have to let someone go, do Impact and Ray, Smoothie, Bunny Fufu. So now do Sneaky Deathly. That has been the C9 way. So it's just weird for them to import an AD carry, which just hasn't been a great role to import.
They are one of the few teams that don't feel like they have to import support, right?
Yeah,
Zazel. They have Zazel.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have Residency? No, they don't have Residency. Yeah, I guess it's kind of weird. I honestly don't think too much about this. I just kind of think that if the guy says yes, then you already know he doesn't care about winning worlds, so...
By the way, I'll throw a detail out. Since you alluded to before about the Team Liquid angle, I'll actually say that I might even do a video on this topic. I think that is the most misunderstood narrative of the entire NA region. Most people watched Team Liquid and saw their limitations as a super team and were like, Oh, well, actually, they thought Team Liquid were the exception that proved that LCS sucked. Because Team Liquid was clearly the best LCS team, but even they could, only just match up with some international teams, and most times be just below the best ones. They weren't going to win Worlds. It was unlikely they would win MSI. Like, these are just reasonable expectations. I go the other way. I agree. There are certain problems that are impossible at the moment to overcome. Like, for example, the whole residency issue. Like, the only real way to get past that is kind of by like doing the loophole of like hoping you get Impact to someone, or take Bjergsen. It's like one. Even that doesn't solve the problem dead. But this is the one angle that I should give you hope. Yes, TSM and Cloud9, as we've seen, are not spending all the money. They're just trying to get players that are like a shrewd deal. Yeah. But since Team Liquid really are going for broke, like you've said, like in past years, Steve tried to get Faker. Like, I believe last year there was some super sick mid lane. I think the ones tried, Caps. And they tried to get Caps. And then obviously now potentially trying to get Tarzan. Here's the thing: as esports gets bigger and the investment goes up, one day NA could be like China. Like, the difference is, instead of IG getting to just get carried by the Shy and the Rookie and the Shy rather, it could be like NA that has like Showmaker and fucking Nagori playing for them in Team Liquid. That could be a real thing. The money's there, and it's going to be there in the future. So don't give up hope. There could still be some super sick hybrid teams.
I can't wait for TL Caps, TL Perks.
The thing about China and the thing about North America, though, is that the practice that you can achieve in China, off scrims, off all of that, is vastly superior. So even if you suddenly import the absolute best players in Spring into every single North American team, right? You're still only getting practice from those swim sets. You're not getting practice from solo queue in the same way that the Chinese are. The strength of the regional player base in China is still very intrinsically tied to their success as a region internationally. Even if you import all of these guys into North America, it won't fix that problem. So that
no, it'll just give them a slightly higher variance to maybe winning games.
It just won't solve the fundamental issue though. Like, the way I like to say this to people is like, you'd bet on G2 if I told you at the start of spring like what G2's roster. Okay, well, like you and me were betting on G2 at the very least when in December and stuff. Like when we saw it on those Loco, we were like, yeah, G2 will make Worlds. G2 can do really fucking well at Worlds, right, with this roster. Would you still bet on that roster if I told you you had to play in North America for 2 seasons? No. You wouldn't bet on it then to win Worlds, right? So this is also, again, why when it comes to imports, my whole thing on it is that if a European or a Korean is saying yes to your offer, you already know that they aren't thinking about their personal development as their priority, right? So it's already kind of like a lost game in that regard.
By the way, one thing I'll just like to say is I'm actually going to offer an olive branch to NA. You know what? Generally, aside from the fact that you've always had more money, and like I said, there's a world in which you might actually have the Showmakers of the world like just on your team instead of in LCK. Sure, that skews it a bit, but as a general region, I actually accept most of the points NA people make. Like that, it should be hard to compete with Europe, and it should be hard to compete with the Asian regions. And you don't have as many players, and you don't have as much good solo queue. My only question would be this: then why were you talking shit, dumb motherfucker? Your talking shit implies you were better. What you're saying when you admit at the end all these problems is you've just admitted you were never better, you dumb motherfuckers. So I accept your surrender, unconditional, and as a result, NA, congrats. You are now the 4th best region until LMS gets their shit together, and you will stay the 4th best region. That's not a diss, that's who you should be.
LMS
Your only problem was you imagined you were better than you were. Well, guess what? Time to wake up from that dream, isn't it?
LMS won't even exist anymore. Riot have done their job for them, It's perfect. Like, Riot have automatically made North America at least 4th.
Let's start ending out the show. Well, Veteran, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for coming to my place. Can you confirm to the chat it does not smell like trash bags?
My sense of smell is horrible, and the chat knows this, so it's a bit difficult. But I can't really smell you, know.
Okay, next time Duncan's here in LA, you should come by my place so I can show you my room doesn't smell like trash bags.
If the fucking offers are like that, no wonder the girls are swarming all over you. Jesus. At least just say, why didn't you just say, like, when you come to our place next, to hang out, then you'll just do it like, I'm not going to come specifically to smell trash and go, stinks of trash in here and just leave. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Also, what are you, some like mad fucking branding agent for Double if like everything in my room is trash? Like, what are you talking about?
No, ever since
the end of the episode.
Yeah, it's the end of the episode. But ever since I showed like the trash bag, like everyone's been like, holy fuck, your room must smell like trash. It's not
No, by the way,
I
By
swear
the way,
to God. Okay,
that
no,
is
you
just a
first, you first.
bachelor thing. Let's be real. Like most bachelors just have like too much rubbish in their apartment. That's not something that weird, is it? Let's be real. Come on.
I swear to God, by the way, people only think that your room is garbage. Like, obviously, they actually saw a garbage bag, but people are already saying that you are messy. They're only saying that because you don't make up your bed. If you make up your bed, that's the only thing they see. That's the only thing they see.
Exactly.
Then suddenly, in their heads, it's a clean room. Everything else can be an apocalyptic wasteland. But if you make up the bed, people will start thinking you've got your shit together.
Isn't making your bed like a thing in Korea? Is that not a thing that?
No, it's a thing in Jordan Peterson book. It's the thing that Jordan Peterson always preaches. Like, if you make your bed, then like you're doing.
Go clean your room, but the premise is the same.
Oh yeah, my mom. Yeah, but that's a thing everywhere.
It's the same premise. Yeah, sure.
All right, thanks so much for being on, Duncan. All right, later.
GG.
Thank you so much to our gold Patreon supporters, ButtPounder420, Tobias Bernasconi, Icelandic C9 Fan, and Texas Ninja Ho Ho. Thank you so much to all the Twitch subs, all the YouTube viewers, all the Spotify or any kind of podcast listeners. Without you guys, it wouldn't be possible, and I appreciate every single one of you guys.
Butt pounder, butt pounder, butt pounder, butt pounder.